system for 6 months already and had even managed to draw a few high-level cards. But even now he was considered a loser. This time, he was offered a transfer. Lin Huan was 25 years old, and now he stared at the message on his phone with skepticism, thinking that the loser's reward was his reward. Nothing new. Even though he hadn't managed to prove himself, the offer to move to another world was somewhat intriguing. After all, he didn't really have anything to lose. On the other hand, it was completely unclear how the game would play out if the hero agreed, so he spent some time thinking about the possible consequences. Be that as it may, the guy pressed the confirmation button, and immediately the system notified him that he was now an official participant with his own number, and the cards would be dealt shortly. This infuriated Lin Huang, who had spent the entire past 6 months doing nothing but waiting to choose a card and complete a simple task. He tapped the screen at random. The clock began to rotate around the 12 rectangles laid out in a circle. Waiting for the result wasn't particularly enjoyable either. The young man waited humbly, realizing that nothing depended on him now, but still not losing hope of receiving a reward. A card appeared and the hero exclaimed indignantly that this must be some new kind of joke. What kind of black blessing card was this? The light from the phone shone directly into his eyes, making it nearly impossible to make out what was written on the screen. Lin Huang strained his eyes. Squinting, he managed to read that the system had made its choice, and the player would immediately be sent to a randomly selected world, and it would be Monster Paradise. Everything around him spun like a kaleidoscope, and the boy felt his body get caught in an energy vortex and begin moving through space. All that remained in the room was a bag of belongings and a phone that had shattered upon hitting the floor when its owner left his world. The system wished the hero a safe journey, but he could no longer read the message. The other world looked nothing like he had imagined. Immediately, statistics appeared showing the player's number and his new age. The young man found himself in the body of a teenager. He was now 15 years old. Thankfully, his name remained the same. The only items he had were his clothes, a pair of bracelets, and a saber. The young man immediately decided to test the weapon he'd been given. Fortunately, it wasn't broken. A week passed, and he still hadn't managed to activate the system, so the young man used his sword mainly for everyday needs. A message arrived stating that the celestial wheel of life had broken, and Lin Huang's time of existence was rapidly, by human standards, shrinking. The body he had received was simply amazing. At the School of Knights, the hero had received the highest recommendations, but now that was of little use, so he called his sister to the table. Without waiting for a reply, the young man flung open the door to Lin Xin's room, his only relative in this new world, where the girl was changing clothes. Shouting that he needed to learn to knock before entering, the beauty kicked her brother out the door, not holding back in her language, and even hitting him with a book. Unsurprisingly, the mood at the table wasn't exactly cheerful, but Lin Huang's cooking was still excellent. Suddenly, the Emperor's ring vibrated. Our hero looked at it with interest, expecting news, since the artifact was most often used for precisely that purpose. It also served as an ID in this new world, where documents and statistics were stored, letters arrived, and there was even a designated space for storing belongings. Lin Xin's ring also vibrated and reported that the Eye of the Abyss had been detected not far from where the girl was. It even provided the exact coordinates. Everyone in the vicinity should be careful. There was a very high probability of a monster invasion, and the girl grew anxious. Her brother reassured her that the message wasn't exactly fresh, and the monsters could have left long ago. Besides, their district was well protected. In reality, he was lying. The district's population was no more than 10,000 people, and everyone took care of their own safety here. There had been precedents. The hero sat down at the computer to check the information. If powerful monsters appeared, there would be no help coming, and the city would be doomed. Lin Xin said she would do her homework. The eye turned out not to be that strong. The knights were conducting a sweep. Killing monsters could prolong his life, but he hadn't fought in this body yet. His sister promised to wash the dishes later. The hero decided to go outside the city tomorrow and kill a couple of monsters left over from the sweep, but he was still afraid of dying. Having calmed down, he went to clear the table himself when suddenly a heart-wrenching scream rang out from Lin Xin's room. Lin Huang rushed down the hallway. He realized that a monster had appeared in their apartment, or that something even worse had happened. The girl kept screaming and calling for his help, so the hero kicked the door down to avoid fiddling with the handle and lock. Lin Xin had cowered in a corner, while some kind of green ghoul with glowing red eyes was trying to break into the room. It had practically crawled through the window, leaving scratches on the table and trails of dark, thick energy around its claws. Lin Huang grabbed the first thing that came to hand. It was his sister's school backpack. He ordered her to hold on to it while he figured out what to do about the vampire. As a diversion, he slammed the backpack into the monster's face, then scooped his sister into his arms and headed for the exit. He ordered Lin Xin to hide, while he decided to lure the monster out onto the street. Vampires were the weakest iron rank monsters, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. In reality, things were far from that simple, but the hero couldn't let his sister get hurt. She was all he had left in this world. As expected, the vampire ran quite briskly after its potential victim. Lin Huang could barely keep up. There were literally just a couple of meters left before the exit of the building, but for some reason the bloodsucker stopped. The hero had to shout a couple of insults to lure him out. With a terrifying growl, the vampire lunged at Lin Huang. A flash of light erupted, as if from an explosion, perhaps from contact with the stairwell door. Our hero ran down the hallway again, realizing that the monster intended to catch up to him and destroy him. There was no time to waste. The monster left marks on the walls as it continued to growl. It turned out to be far stronger than anyone could have imagined. In the closet, covering her mouth with her hands to keep from screaming, Lin Xin trembled with fear, continuing to mentally beg her brother to come to her aid. He pulled out a pistol and took aim. Several shots rang out almost simultaneously, but the bullets seemed to hang in the air, and the enemy wasn't seriously injured. It only grew even angrier. The monster began to transform, releasing some kind of spikes from its body. It was clear that this process was far from pleasant. This frightened Lin Huang a little. He remembered that vampires could do something like this for self-defense, using the energy of blood. The young man broke into a run. He realized he could very well die. The monster's level was definitely not iron, but at least bronze. On its spider-like legs, the vampire quickly caught up to the young man, and he had to smash through a window to escape. The flight wasn't long. He even managed to land on his feet, but he had to figure out a way to make the monster leave. There was no point in even thinking about defeating it now. When the vampire attacked, it used a lot of energy. It was very powerful. The hero dodged, but sensed that something was off about the enemy. The realization came fairly quickly. Due to the transformation, the monster's strength and speed had diminished, and they were decreasing with every passing second. Suddenly, the bloodsucker turned around, revealing a huge wound on his chest. Now everything was crystal clear. The monster had fled from the knights who were hunting him. With a wound like that, it wouldn't last long, so he could try using the pistol again. If everything went well, Lin Huang would not only save himself and his sister, but also extend his life in this world a little longer with the reward for killing the monster. The guy jumped back again and started shooting at the vampire. Now his mood was much better than before. The monster continued to growl and made attempts to reach its prey with its claws. Fortunately, to no avail. The guy jumped back once more, but reminded himself that he needed to keep his distance if he didn't want to become lunch. At one point, the young man slipped and began to fall backward. The enemy was already right there. It scrambled up the wall of the house to jump down on Lin Huang. Our hero fired with his last ounce of strength, convinced he was already a goner. The young man fired a few more shots at random. It was a waste of ammunition because their trajectory didn't even come close to the target. But to die like this, confirming his reputation as a loser, was too much to bear. So the young man started shooting at the enemy again. This time the bullets hit the vampire and even wounded him. The monster, suffering from the pain, decided against attacking. The bullets struck the unprotected body one after another, allowing Lin Huang to get back on his feet. As the monster simply collapsed downward, it smashed through the asphalt, and all that was visible now were its hideous, spider-like claws. Our hero was glad the job was done, but the vampire leaped out of the hole in the ground in a single bound and was now preparing for a new attack. And yet it was seriously wounded, including from Lin Huang's shots, so he had to strike first and simply finish off this creature. The young man convinced himself that what stood before him was merely prey that needed to be finished off. He gathered his strength to complete what he had started. Suddenly, the vampire collapsed face first. Now all that remained was to finish him off with a shot to the back of the head, and the young man took aim. With the hope that it would die, our hero pulled the trigger. He was extremely pleased that everything had turned out so well. The job was done, and now he had to get home as soon as possible to make sure his sister was okay. A message appeared stating that the system had finally been activated. Lin Huang was congratulated on successfully completing his first mission. He was, to put it mildly, surprised. The young man couldn't believe he'd actually achieved any success in the game and opened the information window. He had indeed received a reward for the kill. Not only that, but the monster was of a higher level, so the young man received a level up and was also able to choose a new card. In response to the hero's surprised exclamation, he was told that everything was absolutely correct. Those were the rules of the game, and a strange monster appeared, quite cute looking. Lin Huang cursed in surprise. This seemed rude to the speaker, who asked him to communicate with his assistant in a more polite manner in the future. Then the creature got down to business, noting that in addition to gold, Lin Huang also had a special card for killing a monster. Looking in the indicated direction, the young man froze. Before him was his personal card with his name and stats. And those stats were utterly disheartening. Combat power and combat skills were completely absent. The game remained cruel and unfair. Meanwhile, the stats of the monster he had defeated were far higher. The vampire belonged to the 3rd combat level, green copper, and also possessed the skills of rebirth and blood magic. Our hero asked his assistant how to evaluate cards in this world. The assistant replied that white ones were common, green ones rare, blue ones legendary, and purple and orange ones divine. But Lin Huang only had loser cards. He slapped his hand and asked why he couldn't draw a rare monster card. Couldn't he just choose one himself? The assistant hit the guy on the head with something heavy, saying that he was actually quite lucky. Hadn't he looked in the mirror in a while? The young man nodded and began to shed tears, saying that he knew it himself. He was a loser with a terrible reputation. This reaction puzzled the assistant, but he was even more puzzled by the suspicious sounds nearby. It seemed someone had come here and was now slowly approaching. The assistant vanished and the guy froze in place. The vampire's ashes hadn't even cooled yet when a female knight arrived at the scene of the battle. She was very pretty and smiled as she fixed her hair, then asked who had killed the vampire. The beauty's name was Li Lan, and she explained that she had received a warning about danger. It had been reported that a monster had appeared here. Lin Huang explained, flustered, that this was indeed the case. His sister must have called since the vampire had attacked them right at home. He glanced at the knight. It was strange to realize that the association's famous silver hunter, Li Lan, turned out to be a girl. She wasn't about to back down and reminded him that she wanted an answer to her question, which he still hadn't heard. The hunter stepped on the monster's corpse and declared that she would ask it another way. Did our hero kill this vampire? He shouldn't try to be evasive. Lin Huang replied that it might be so. The monster was already partially rotting, so what happened could be called an accident. Li Lan noticed that the guy's life wheel was broken. Besides, he hadn't even reached the iron rank yet. It was hard to believe that someone with such stats could kill a vampire. It must have been sheer luck, so the knight asked for details. Lin Huang started to tell her something, but then immediately remembered his sister. After all, they had been together at the very beginning. He rushed home to check if everything was okay with Lin Xing, shouting to the hunter that he would share the details later, which upset her. The young man's sister was safe and sound, which couldn't be said for the building that had long been their home. Smoke was billowing from it. The girl looked at the surviving wall. In her funny pajamas, she looked like a little girl. Now all that was left was to cry. They would have to pay off the mortgage on this apartment for another 32 years. Just then, Lin Huang came running up. He was trying to catch his breath, but still called out to his sister. She rushed toward him with open arms, screaming that she'd been terrified and had been sure Lin Huang was dead. The hero tried to comfort his sister. Li Lan appeared. After assessing the destruction, she realized she had even more questions for the boy. He had managed to kill a monster of at least 3rd-rank copper all by himself. Lin Xin explained with delight and pride that her brother was the best student at the Night Academy. He asked her sheepishly not to spread the word about it, especially now. The little girl immediately changed the subject and asked Li Lan who she was and why she had come to them. The girl explained that she was a silver hunter and had come in response to a distress signal. While the hunter was scanning, Lin Xin exclaimed that she couldn't believe she was seeing this famous person with her own eyes. The little girl asked what kind of equipment it was. It turned out to be a gold-tier item that could record and document damage, and the association would pay the boy's compensation. Upon hearing this, Lin Xin was thrilled. Such a device meant that Li Lan was fabulously wealthy, and our hero fell into despair. Noticing that the girl had mentioned the life crystal with admiration, the hunter burst out laughing, declaring that she had plenty of them. Li Lan asked the little girl to close her eyes. Since she had called the heroine Big Sister, she would receive a small gift. The Silver Hunter gave Lin Xing a 3-year-old life crystal, a true treasure. Our hero thought that his sister wasn't as simple as she seemed. Meanwhile, the knight noted that since the vampire was dead, there was no need to dwell on the matter. Lin Huang simply asked what exactly she needed to know. The girl explained that even she would have a hard time defeating such a monster, and since the guy's life wheel was broken, special equipment had clearly been used. Hearing that the hunter wanted to buy this equipment, the hero was taken aback. He explained that there was nothing of the sort, and that, in fact, he had seen golden equipment for the first time in her hands. The girl replied that she was very sorry to hear that. It meant the guy had abilities and it was a shame his life wheel was broken. If he'd restored it, he would have become famous. Li Lan had already turned and walked away, wishing him luck and promising that someone would come tomorrow to settle his payments and arrange for free housing. Lin Huang apologized for the disturbance. Li Lan turned back and winked at him, asking him not to rush to die. They would see each other again someday. He waved cheerfully to the Silver Hunter in farewell, while Lin Xing was only concerned with where they would sleep tonight. They went into the nearest house where no one was home. The hero suggested they just get some sleep and deal with their problems tomorrow. Lin Xin started snoring before her cheek even touched the pillow. After all, she was still just a child. Looking at the sleeping little girl, the young man caught himself thinking that being a responsible older brother wasn't all that easy. Just then, Xiaohe appeared, saying that the little sister was simply adorable, but that Lin Huang himself was good for nothing. The young man jumped again in surprise. The hero said that his assistant had scared him, to which he received the reply that no one could see him except the player himself, so there was no need to worry. The guy replied that he really was too weak to protect Lin Xing, so he wanted to draw another card immediately. The assistant asked several times if he was sure he wanted to do this right now, as the consequences could be anything. All 12 randomly selected cards were laid out in front of Lin Huang. Now he just had to draw one of them. The young man reached out, saying that everything would be fine. In this new world, he was incredibly lucky. He pointed his finger at a rectangle, which immediately began to emit a very bright yellow light, a good sign. For a while, nothing else happened. The guy was already starting to lose patience, waiting for the result of his choice. Suddenly, the card rose into the air and began to spin. Images began to appear on it, and a glow emerged. The system notified the master that he had received congratulations for his choice of mission card. The message sounded strange. Lin Huang took the mission card in his hand and began to examine it closely, but this yielded absolutely no results. Then an image of a girl appeared, and she informed him that he needed to become a novice hunter within a month and obtain a correction card. Otherwise, the player would lose his blessing. The guy was outraged. You had to be at least iron rank to participate in the rookie selection, and you couldn't lose the blessing. The assistant told him to read the conditions again. Lin Huang flipped the card over and studied the task more closely, then clutched his head and cried out that he would be a loser for the rest of his life. He realized he had to complete the task, no matter what the correction card's value was, because without the blessing, he would simply perish. The next morning, the first thing our hero heard upon waking was his sister saying she was heading to school. He barely managed to dash out the door of their ruined house. The girl had already gotten quite far ahead, and the boy was left waiting for the workers. There were no monsters left in the area. Lin Huang caught himself thinking that his little sister, true to form, was running late for class, but he wasn't the least bit upset about it. The hero went inside and closed the door behind him. Well, it was time to get down to business. He simply couldn't put it off any longer. Xiaohui suddenly appeared. He looked a bit strange and was surrounded by a pile of various objects. The assistant didn't immediately think to say hello. The guy took him in his hands and said they needed to sort out the situation with the card. They had to find a way to complete the task at any cost. The little monster continued to lick himself, realizing that the chances of passing the selection were slim. Fate had played a cruel joke on the guy, since at least an iron rank was required. Lin Huang threatened to turn the assistant into dog stew if he didn't figure out a way to bypass registration. He had to take the novice hunter exam, no matter the cost, so now was the moment to really put his mind to work. The hero suggested he could disguise himself as a tamer to take part in the selection. He'd already received a level-up card, and the assistant praised the idea. Tamers are a rarity these days. A third-rank copper-class vampire should be a solid enough foundation. The main thing is that no one coats their weapon with blood-suppressing poison. The assistant was greatly surprised when he realized that his charge was actually going to use the level-up card. Lin Huang explained that he understood how wasteful this was, but he had no other options, so he asked for details on how to summon a monster using the card. Upon hearing that he had to present the card and then crush it for the monster to appear, the young man asked if anyone besides himself would see the card. Xiaohe replied that only the player, his assistant, and the monster could see the card, so he shouldn't worry about his trick being exposed. Our hero decided to test how it worked and presented the card of a defeated vampire with the rating Total Wimp. It immediately appeared in his hand. Then the guy crushed it. The shards began to glow and scattered in all directions, like moths. Many fell behind Lin Huang and began to turn red. Gradually, they formed the very vampire he had summoned, resembling the player himself. A whirlwind of blood-white light swirled around him, and the young man asked his assistant in surprise if there really was a vampire standing before him. Xiaohe informed him that he could choose one of the summoned creature's skills, and the young man decided to take the camouflage ability. Then Lin Huang suggested using a level-up card on the vampire, which surprised the assistant. He reminded him that this could only be done once. Upon receiving the command to begin, the little monster took out a gold card of an advanced-level vampire and waved it in front of his master's nose several times. The process happened in the blink of an eye, and when it was all over, nothing much had changed, except perhaps for the summoned creature's appearance, which had transformed. Its hair had taken on a silvery hue, and our hero called it a real looker. After taking another look at the color of its hair, the young man announced that he had already come up with a name for the monster. It would be called Bai. Apparently, the system approved this choice, and a process of recording information began around the vampire's head. The card in Lin Huang's hand began to glow again. Something interesting was happening. Namely, the vampire's level was increasing. Now the card recorded the name, as well as the level and rarity. The monster belonged to the rare category, and the regeneration skill and the ability to be summoned appeared. The young man wondered why the monster's level had dropped. It turned out to be because his master, that is, Lin Huang himself, was too weak. Xiaohe kept mocking him, saying that this sort of thing happens extremely rarely. Our hero told him to keep quiet if he didn't want to end up without any friends. Just then, someone started pounding on the door. The assistant said he didn't need any friends at all, to which Lin Huang simply told him to get lost. Calm down. Our hero walked to the door and grabbed the handle. He still couldn't figure out who had come. Standing on the threshold were a couple of burly men in expensive suits and dark glasses. The guy asked fearfully who they were. There was no answer, and Lin Huang wondered who had come to visit him. The mafia, hitmen, or vampires seeking revenge. Meanwhile, one of the guests asked for the guy's name. It turned out they were employees of the association, tasked with inspecting and renovating the house. Saying that the renovation would take 5 days and that temporary accommodations had been arranged for him and his sister, the employee handed him a key card and promised to take their renovation requests into account. As he took the key card for a luxury hotel, the young man listened to the apologies for the temporary inconvenience and could hardly believe his ears. It also turned out that the association was providing massive subsidies to victims of the monster attack. At the hotel entrance, Lin Huang remarked that he never thought he'd end up in such a luxurious place. His little sister happily announced that the school was also right nearby. They were greeted by the doorman, and our hero suddenly decided he wanted to eat first and then go up to the room, which surprised the girl. When they entered the restaurant, Lin Xin said in a trembling voice that she wasn't hungry at all. Her brother immediately approached her with a pile of food in his hands and noted that it was all free for them, so she shouldn't hold back. The girl didn't make him repeat the offer twice and immediately began to eat. Lin Huang thought she could have been a little more reserved. Suddenly, he noticed that everyone around them had fallen silent, and the restaurant had become eerily quiet. The people at the tables looked frightened for some reason, and a man in a black suit, clad in armor and armed, was making his way past them. This bald man really did look very scary and fierce. It was no wonder that everyone had suddenly lost any desire to socialize. Suddenly, Lin Xin pointed directly at the bald man and told her brother that he scared her. Our hero asked her not to show it in public and to just eat. The stranger sat down right behind Lin Huang, so his little sister was very curious as to why the man was staring at them so intently. Finally, the girl finished all the food her brother had brought her and stretched contentedly. She had really eaten her fill. Our hero immediately pulled her toward the exit. The stranger's aura wouldn't leave him alone. Since defeating such an opponent was impossible, they needed to make a quick getaway back to their room. While his sister protested that she hadn't tried the dessert yet, the young man noticed that the stranger in black had also risen from the table. The man hadn't even finished half of the dishes he'd ordered. He looked preoccupied and even a little angry. Lin Huang was walking toward the room door. While the little girl marveled at the softness of the carpet, he was thinking only of the pursuer. Lin Xin showed them the room number they needed, while her brother pondered that even if he couldn't defeat the enemy, he was duty-bound to protect his little sister. But his nerves suddenly gave out completely, and our hero turned to the stranger and simply shouted that there was no need to follow them at all. The man's face remained calm but ominous. He began to explain why he had come here and stopped at the door. It turned out that his room was right across from the one they'd given the guys. With that, the bald man pulled out a key card and opened his door. Lin Huang apologized and went into his room. It was simply enormous, with 2 separate rooms, but he still couldn't calm down right away. Lin Xin flopped down on the couch without a care, saying that there were too many people in this hotel so no one would dare to harm them. Her brother agreed and sent the girl to take a shower and then to do her homework, adding that he really had gotten too worked up from exhaustion. They spent the night at the hotel. His little sister was still sleeping soundly like a baby, but it wasn't so easy for her brother to relax. He decided to check the news about the Silver Hunter, their benefactor, hoping to glean some useful information. Li Lan was an excellent fighter. It was no wonder she was called a genius among all the Silver Hunters. The girl was very beautiful. Suddenly, some strange sounds came from the neighboring room, causing the young man to become alert. Lin Huang walked over to the window and looked out. It was around midnight, but one of the guests had decided to take a walk. It was that same stranger in black. He was walking away from the hotel toward the park, or something like that. The man was gripping the hilt of his enormous sword with one hand. I wonder why he left the room and what he was planning to do. Suddenly, the bald man drew his weapon from its sheath and lunged forward sharply, as if trying to pierce someone invisible. Then he stepped back and swung, repeating the motion several times in a row. Apparently, that was exactly why the man had gone out onto the street. Lin Huang realized that this man was a skilled warrior and needed to train to stay in shape, which was exactly what the young man had been lacking. The hero decided to watch the training for a while, hoping to pick up at least something, since there were only 18 styles of swordplay. Watching the well-honed, masterful movements, the young man caught himself thinking that staying at this hotel was a real gift for him. The next morning, a huge eagle flew up to the window of our hero's room. It worked for the delivery service. Lin Xin peeked out from the bathroom. She was just brushing her teeth and needed to find out if her brother had ordered anything. A mountain of packages towered over Lin Huan. He replied that everything was fine and reminded his sister that it was time to get dressed for school. The girl tried to find out what her brother had bought, but he just brushed her off, saying he was preparing for his hunter's exam, and hurried to show her the door. Finally left alone, the boy breathed a sigh of relief. He had spent practically everything he had on this gear. He really wanted to believe that such expenses would pay off. At the very least, he couldn't decide which box to unpack first. There were quite a few of them. One small box contained armor-piercing bullets. The young man sincerely hoped they might save a life. He had also ordered binoculars and a canteen, but his main weapon was a special sword, the weapon he handled best. A long blade made of black steel and well-balanced. Taking the sword in his hands, Lin Huang tried to recall all the techniques of the 18th style. He was confident he could execute them perfectly. He lunged forward in a flash, then swung from right to left and executed a few more attacking moves. Everything went perfectly. Immediately, a system message appeared stating that the player had received a new fragment of the sword map, which surprised him somewhat. The guy didn't quite understand what was going on, so the assistant explained that for every achievement, you could get a map fragment, and eventually they would all combine into an additional skill. Lin Huang was delighted that, if he worked hard enough, he could quickly collect all the fragments. But Xiao He asked him to keep his expectations in check. It wasn't that simple. Simply practicing the moves wouldn't be enough to get 100%. Practical application in battle and good effectiveness were required, not just perfect technique. It turns out you have to move exactly like the man with the scars to get a fragment, and that goes for every single one of them. This further strengthened the hero's resolve to learn the necessary techniques and finally add a combat skill to his repertoire. The assistant announced that he was going to sleep. For about 8 hours, the young man diligently practiced the moves of the 18th combat technique without stopping for a single minute. After 9 hours, he simply collapsed onto the floor, completely exhausted and could only groan. Every muscle in his body ached. The system reported that the technique was about 20% mastered. Our hero could barely breathe, let alone say anything about it. Meanwhile, Lin Xin returned from school. The hotel manager, Ding Zhu, came in with her. He had intended to greet the guest but decided to come back later if the young man was busy. The young man invited the manager to sit down and offered him some tea, noting that he had just been training a bit and was perfectly capable of chatting. He just needed to catch his breath. Lin Huang thanked the staff and management for their hospitality. The accommodations were simply amazing. Ding Zhu asked him to contact him immediately if he needed anything. His sister remarked that the manager was quite modest yet understanding. The tea he'd offered helped the guy recover. The girl also added that the association had rewarded them for killing the monster and had passed something on to them. They needed to see what it was. Lin Huang was delighted. Since they'd managed to destroy the green copper vampire, they might have been given something truly useful. The box looked impressive and opened with the young man's fingerprints. There was clearly something valuable inside. It turned out to be the latest weapon, one of the association's newest developments. The Black Eagle pistol, capable of switching between sniper mode and full auto-fire. This black steel weapon was far superior to green copper-level guns. It was exactly what she needed for hunting. Lin Xin once again appreciated the capabilities of the association. The problem was that mechanical weapons required energy. Until a player reached the black steel rank, they couldn't use the pistol. She needed to level up faster. Her little sister started to worry that the hunter selection process seemed like a dangerous venture. Sure, her big brother was strong, but anything could happen. Lin Huang reassured the girl, saying that since he had promised to take care of her, he would do everything to be by her side, so she shouldn't worry. The conversation ended with the kids agreeing that Lin Xin should do her homework, while the young man would train a little more. The boy picked up his sword. After the tea prepared by the manager, he felt completely rested and rejuvenated. He honed his movements until he unlocked a few more fragments of his sword-fighting skill. In the process, the hero caught himself feeling like he simply couldn't stop. With each card, he felt his concentration and dexterity growing. This went on until morning. The water jug was nearly empty, and the boy was desperately thirsty, but he kept practicing his moves. Lin Xin came out of the room. She realized her brother had been training all night and was very surprised. Lin Huang replied that he was close to his goal. There was very little left. The girl snorted and said she was going to class. Meanwhile, her brother kept swinging his sword, now with maximum precision. The system sent a notification that another fragment of the new skills map had been obtained. At this rate, the plan would indeed be successful. The notifications came with a distinctive sound, making Lin Huang jump every time. But now the wild sword of nature skill was getting closer. And that was inspiring. All 300 fragments must be assembled together. This would unlock the corresponding option in this world's game system. When the signal sounded for the 300th time, the boy gained the ability to merge the fragments into a single whole. He was literally beaming with joy. He could already picture the entire map in his mind and was getting ready to press the confirmation button, humming a cheerful tune. The rare skill was a very tempting prospect, so our hero immediately selected the corresponding option and began waiting for the data to update. A new card immediately appeared in his hand, depicting Lin Huang himself with his sword. The rare wild nature skill was indeed available. He needed to look at the information on the top of the card to understand how to use the new skill. This was a rare gold rank weapon skill, a treasure obtained through hard work, now ready for use. Its power depended on the owner's level and grew along with it. The assistant explained that the wild nature skill had two sides. If fused together, they could yield a legendary level ability, but the second side had been lost. Since no one knew its location, Lin Huang decided that the scarred man might know something, since it was a technique he had seen him use. The decision was made in a matter of seconds, and soon the young man was already pressing the call button for the room across the hall. The stranger opened the door almost immediately and asked in a displeased tone why he had been disturbed. Our hero bowed and said he was very grateful for having had the opportunity to learn an unusual sword technique over the past 3 days. The man remained silent. Finally, he said that he hadn't taught anyone, so if the young man had picked something up and mastered it, that was none of his business. The door slammed shut with a crash. Lin Huang only managed to say that, whatever the case, he was grateful for the knowledge he had gained. He repeated his thanks with a smile several more times, but the room across the hall remained completely silent. The young man flinched but thought that first he needed to pass the novice hunter exam, and then he could return to this conversation and get the information. Soon his sister arrived. It turned out that their house had already been repaired, and they would be able to return to their apartment tomorrow. A message to that effect had just come in. The girl looked upset. and her brother asked if she didn't want to lose her nice room or good restaurant food anymore. Lin Huang promised that he would soon be able to provide them with excellent housing and food. The girl thanked him and said she had no doubt that her brother would take care of her. They both decided to go to bed early. Tomorrow would be a long and eventful day, and the lights in the house across the street began to go out. The man with the scar told the manager that he didn't understand why they were pinning their hopes on a kid with a low level and a broken wheel of life. He only had 2 months left to live. The man reminded the fighter, whose name was Gu Yi, that they had known each other for a long time. Could there really be any doubt about his knowledge and intuition? The warrior replied that he didn't doubt them at all, but asked why Gu Qin had decided to teach the boy a sword fighting technique that wasn't really suited for this world in the first place. The boss reminded the player that he too had interacted with the hero. He should share his impressions. The man replied that the kid was talented, but not a genius. He was far from Li Lang. The mentor asked with a smile how long it had taken Gu Yi himself to learn the upper part of the Wild Nature sword skill card. The bald man replied that it involved deep processes. He had practiced for 18 hours a day, over 103 days to master this technique. If such a brilliant swordsman spent so much time studying it, then Lin Huan would need about 2 to 3 years, according to rough estimates. The manager, or whoever called himself that, held up 3 fingers and asked if the hunter was sure. The hunter noted that it might take even longer. The old man smiled and said that the young man had already studied and mastered this skill. It had taken him only 3 days. Gu Yi shouted that this was impossible, to which he received the reply that nothing was impossible. They should hurry up, as the young man had already started packing his things to leave. The man with the scar closed his eyes and nodded. He still couldn't wrap his head around how the master had recognized the young man's power so quickly. The next day, Lin Huang and Lin Xing headed straight for the neighborhood where their house was located. At the sight of what they saw, both of them were speechless. The kids couldn't even imagine that everything could change so incredibly in such a short time. The girl suggested they had the wrong address, but her brother assured her it was correct. This was their house, though now it looked more like a palace. A servant stood at the door and immediately prepared to open it, greeting the owners. The man asked with a smile if Li Huang was satisfied with their work. The hero asked in confusion if this was the standard for restoring houses destroyed by monsters. The association employee laughed and replied that they had gone the extra mile because the young man was a friend of Miss Li's. At first, the player didn't understand who they were talking about, but his sister hinted that they owed their new mansion to Li Lang, the Silver Hunter. The hero asked where the girl got so much money and influence. It turned out that Li Lang's father was one of the top 3 leaders of the Hunters Association, and her mother was a member of the district board. As he left, the man waved and wished them a pleasant day. Lin Huang thought he wouldn't want to run into him again. Let the house remain safe and sound in the future. Lin Xing noticed that they had been mistakenly showered with gold. Her brother declared that everything had its advantages, and now they would be living in a luxurious place. Watching his little sister jump around the living room in delight, the player decided that the first part of the plan, concerning housing, had been completed. Now it was time to focus on the main goal. In 3 days, the exam for young hunters was scheduled to take place. All participants would fiercely compete for a place in the sun. Lin Huang decided he simply had to be the best among them, or at the very least not lose face despite the broken wheel of life. But first, he had to overcome his own fear. A fear of heights that had tormented our hero for almost his entire life in the previous world. He had to take a short journey on a monster that was a cross between a lion and an eagle. It was often used for such tasks. The first few seconds were terrifying, but then the sensation of flight and freedom allowed the young man to relax and rein in his emotions. Quite quickly, this low-level monster transported the young man to his destination. It turned out that everything had been planned out. The speed was simply incredible, and by the end of the flight, Lin Huang was extremely inspired. He had done a great job. The city turned out to be quite large and crowded. He needed to find the registration office as soon as possible and report his success. Our hero thought of his sister. He had left her all his savings, so she would have to live on her own for a while. But she was more worried about her brother than herself. Just then, a guy with a suitcase appeared and shouted that he was looking for company to register for the exam. Yin Yihang was surprised that Lin Huang had decided to try his hand at it without even reaching the black steel rank. The guy was amazed by such knowledge. The new acquaintance suggested following the flow of people. There were both newcomers heading for their assignments and locals who had finished their missions. Lin Huang noticed that Yin Yihang knew his way around well. He replied that he had dreamed of joining the association his whole life and had learned everything there was to know about it. A beautiful woman came out to meet the guys, offering to escort them to the exam registration area. It was very kind and unexpected. When they entered the building, their jaws dropped in surprise. It should be noted that such a reaction was entirely justified. There were so many people wanting to join the ranks of the new recruits that the line didn't fit in the lobby and wound in a spiral. Lin Huang asked what to do next, and his companion replied that there would be an interview before the exam, where they would explain all the necessary details and rules for participation. He wanted to share rumors about what kind of test had been prepared this year, but a red-haired woman shouted that the hall must be quiet. The beauty's name was Yahello. She announced that everyone currently in the hall could proceed, while those who were late would automatically be disqualified from the exam. Yin Yi muttered in astonishment that their examiner would be the witch Yahello, and our hero asked what she meant by witch. The examiner announced that she would now explain the rules of the test. If anyone was inattentive or noisy, they had only themselves to blame. The exam site is 330 kilometers from the given coordinates in the Golden Flame Desert. It will take about 15 days to reach the final destination. The girl pointed out the coordinates on the map of the area, noting that they were not allowed to bring water or food with them. Such were the rules of the exam. Noticing that Lin Huang had marked the areas with monsters but hadn't written down the coordinates of the water sources, Yin Yi was surprised, but the boy replied that he feared the monsters more than he feared thirst. Yu continued to describe the route. They had to cross the Divine Snow Mountain Range. If they didn't, the exam wouldn't count. Equipment couldn't be used, but a gold-tier artifact was installed at the summit that could be utilized. The group shared their impressions in horror. The woman announced that the newcomers' gear would be inspected by specialists. All items above the black steel level would be confiscated, along with other listed items. Everyone will be issued communication devices in case of an emergency. Using them will save them, but the exam will be failed. With these words, the witch ordered Lin Huan to wait. For a while, she just looked at him with a smile, and the guy decided that, because of his low rank and broken wheel of life, they would simply weed him out right now. A second later, Yahello allowed the player to continue on his way. He thanked her and thought that, in some ways, the new world wasn't so bad after all. Before stepping into the portal, our hero caught himself feeling once again that this was simply unbelievable. He was about to be transported to the map. Behind Yin Yi's back, Yi declared that this new spatial equipment was worth more than the best weapon. Lin Huang suggested naming the witch Doraemon. Before inspecting the inventory, the newbies were told that some functions of the Imperial Ring would be restricted and tested, especially the distress signal. Everyone was horrified, with capabilities cut back and features like the map disabled. Passing the exam would be nearly impossible. Instead of answering, Yahello announced that the clock was ticking. Those who passed the test would not regret it in the future, and the strict selection was entirely justified. The newcomers rushed forward, some hurried to the water source, while others simply wanted to outpace their competitors. They would fight later. His new friend told our hero that he would go ahead and scout the area. Lin Huang agreed. He couldn't run at that speed anyway. He estimated that at this pace he wouldn't be able to cover more than 40 kilometers a day, which meant he'd cover at most half the distance in 15 days. They were being watched closely. The witch had mentioned that our hero was of a lower rank than the others. She had thought he might have a special gift or skill, but she hadn't seen anything of the sort. At the same time, the woman was certain that the young man was capable of surprising everyone and suggested waiting a little while to confirm her hunch. The desert looked exactly as a desert should look. Lin Huang was completely alone, clearly lagging behind the others. The assistant wasn't in a hurry to encourage the young man either, complaining that he wouldn't achieve much at a snail's pace. The hero waved him off, saying he was different from the other test subjects. In a couple of days, Snow Mountain would be in sight. Xiao He reminded him that they needed to cover about 100 kilometers a day. Lin Huang could only count on himself. He carefully reviewed his notes to formulate a plan. The system's functions were limited, but the assistant could still be quite useful. The hero requested information on the Golden Flame Desert, specifically the monster Shatu. The enormous monsters lived in groups, so Lin Huang decided that by killing them, he would level up his skill to collect map fragments. Besides, he could move faster on a Shatu. Xiao He shouted that this was madness and that a single player couldn't handle the Shatu, but the guy calmly asked, "Who said I'm alone?" The Shatu tribe's camp looked quite settled and civilized. Even at night, they kept a fire burning and posted sentries. However, the two-headed monster wasn't particularly vigilant. It was practically asleep sitting by the fire. Everything changed when a fairly large rock flew straight into the monster's forehead. It clearly hadn't expected that. Both heads turned to look at the dark shadow at the edge of the dune. It was Lin Huang, but the Shatu couldn't really make out human features. The monster raised its club and stood up. It was certain it could defeat the insolent intruder with a single blow, and saw no point in waking the others. Soon the weapon crashed down where the young man had been standing just a moment ago. Fortunately, the hero's speed allowed him to dodge it easily. As he leaped aside, the young man caught the repulsive stench emanating from the giant. The young man scrambled up the dune, shouting that fresh, juicy meat was right there. He was trying to lure the giant out of the camp. The giant roared and charged after him, holding his club above his head. The monster was not so much hungry as it was angry. In the next second, something whizzed past the monster's neck, and the menacing roar ceased instantly. Bai, the summoned vampire, stood completely calm. He had severed both of the Shatu's heads with a single swing of his blade. Lin Huang was extremely pleased. His summoned green copper-level monster could now do all the dirty work, while the hero himself remained safe. He approached Bai and thanked him for working cleanly and efficiently. In response, the vampire merely grunted. He wasn't one for small talk. Suddenly, a system notification appeared. Our hero's health bar appeared on the screen, and he looked at it closely. Suddenly, the wheel appeared above the young man's head, and now it looked almost full. Moreover, it had grown in size. The assistant remembered that he hadn't shared the main news. The summoned monster gives half of its experience and rewards to the master, and since Bai's health bar is full, it gives everything. This delighted Lin Huang. Before he had only 3 health points, but now he had 28. The hero certainly wouldn't die so easily now. It would be easy to reach the steel rank now. The young man drew his sword and shouted that it was time to go hunting. Meanwhile, the rest of the tribe woke up and began calling out to their comrade. The boy's shouts had roused half the tribe. The monsters were dying so quickly that they didn't even have time to figure out who had attacked their camp. Bai wielded his sword in silence, while our hero commented on every move of the recently mastered wild nature sword technique. More and more Shatu rushed toward the sound of voices and the roars of their comrades. A little longer, and the situation could have become critical for Lin Huang. But it didn't. The more monsters he killed, the more fragments of the new map he earned. With that much life energy, it wasn't difficult at all. Bai's victims also counted toward the summoner, and with every passing minute, he felt stronger and stronger. Soon, all 152 cells of the Wheel of Life were filled. The assistant reported that a new gray level for new energy would be activated, and the guy agreed. The new level of cells added at least 10 years to his life. Just a couple of days ago, our hero couldn't even have dreamed of this. He took out his gun and started shooting, goading Bai to fight even more aggressively. He needed to make the most of the situation. All the Shatu had been destroyed, and Lin Huang slowed down a bit, but then a terrifying roar came from behind him. The young man asked his assistant if someone had actually managed to survive. The assistant replied only that someone had gotten into serious trouble. The heart-wrenching sound was so loud that the other players gathered around the campfire to rest heard it. They recognized the Shatu's voice, but the roar was so loud that it clearly belonged to a monster in a berserk state, and the group grew alarmed. Yin Yi Hang knew that other monsters could attack the Shata, meaning a bloody massacre was nearby. The player hoped his friend was far away from here right now. He didn't know that Lin Huang was right in the thick of it. Not only that, but he'd started the fight. And now our hero was beginning to regret it. He stared at the monster that had appeared, a good 10 meters tall, and panicked. His assistant wished him luck, noting that one giant Shatu was better than a bunch of small ones. It was the leader of the green copper-level tribe, and it was charging straight at those who had destroyed its kin. Bai didn't wait long, and in the very next moment, the monster was one head shorter, but that didn't stop it. The monster's hide proved so tough that the vampire couldn't deal enough damage to it. Lin Huang began to grind his teeth in anger. He hadn't expected to get involved in such a venture at all. The leader of the horde continued to advance on the player, intending to punish him for his audacity and for all his kin. The guy pulled out his gun and took aim. The giant had excellent health and strength stats. If he wasn't stopped, everyone was doomed. The hero decided to shoot for the eyes to hit the most vulnerable spots. This gave them a chance to survive. Shatu didn't suffer much from this attack. He could simply close his eyes and avoid the damage. Besides, it wasn't easy to aim properly, especially with the constant barrage of blows from massive fists and clubs that he had to dodge. The young man fired a couple more shots and tried to run to the side, ordering Bai to attack from behind. The monster held out his palm against the pistol and thus stopped the bullets. His skin was indeed armored. But the tribal chief didn't yet know that a vampire, roughly his equal in power, was already flying at him from behind. The attack failed. The giant simply kicked the flame-engulfed opponent aside with a flick of his foot. Lin Huang kept shouting something about needing a new attack, but he looked a little flustered and glanced back at Shatu. The very next second, he completely forgot about Bai and charged straight at our hero, choosing him as his new target. We had to come up with a backup plan immediately, or the guy would have literally only a few seconds left to live. The huge, toothy monster had clearly decided that he was going to have a hearty lunch at our hero's expense. He sped up even more. Well, there was no choice left. Lin Huang switched the black steel pistol to a higher power setting. Now the weapon was dealing maximum possible damage. The guy wished his opponent a quick death and opened fire. This time the effectiveness was excellent. The system displayed a corresponding message about the new stats. The chief of the Shatu tribe, a massive berserker, collapsed to the ground. The assistant praised our hero for a job well done. Bai said nothing, but it was clear he was impressed too. The young man noticed that Xiao He ran away very quickly whenever things got dangerous. He replied that he wasn't very useful in combat and didn't want to be a burden. A notification appeared about the slaying of a higher-level monster. For this, the hero received a Shatu map. It was a full set, and Lin Huang was overjoyed. It seemed that luck had finally turned in his favor. The Shatu's stats were simply superb. Although the game classified it as trash, the most important thing was that it could now be summoned. The hero took the card in his hand and explained that Bai wouldn't have been able to defeat this monster because of its special ability, so everything had worked out perfectly. The assistant started explaining something about muscle mass and increased health stats, after which he was told off for being too boring. After destroying the Shatu tribe and its leader, our hero now had 3 summonable monsters, a decent combat unit. Xiao He explained that this wasn't quite the case. No matter how many cards a player had, they could only summon monsters one at a time. Lin Huang sighed heavily and said goodbye to Bai, thanking the vampire for a job well done. The chief of the Shatu tribe took his place, huge and fearsome, and the hero decided to name him Tyrant. The assistant asked if the player wanted to use the summoned creature as a mount. The young man replied that the card was too rare to be used that way. The young man sent this monster to rest as well, deciding that an ordinary Shatu would be far better suited for the task. This creature looked far more suitable for carrying a couple of people, and Xiao He praised the young man for his quick thinking. The Shatu walked through the desert, while the assistant explained that monsters of the same type but of a higher rank could absorb lower rank cards and thus become stronger. The hero replied that he could do that later, after strengthening the tyrant, but for now he would simply use the Shatu for transportation, protection, and hunting. He gave the command to speed up, and the beast raced across the dune no worse than any racehorse. Lin Huang was in high spirits. On his own, he wouldn't have made it even a tenth of the way through the desert. Everything was simply wonderful until the Shatu stumbled. After all, it was quite bulky and clumsy. But that wasn't the issue. A taut chain was hidden in the sand. The boy landed in the sand and began to wonder who could have set this up. Then someone asked if the boy wasn't afraid of dying right there, in the middle of the desert. This came as a complete surprise to the player. It was 3 candidates taking the exam. They laughed at the kid who had dared to embark on this adventure, even though he was lower in rank. Shatu growled, and our hero replied that he hadn't expected to meet people here. He thought the reason for the fall was some strange monster. The guys laughed, saying he'd fallen into a trap, though they added it wasn't on purpose, and introduced themselves as cousins, Zuo Kui Kang and Shuji. Immediately identifying the leader, Lin Huang announced that he would ask them to make way, as he needed to continue his exciting journey. Zhu Kui Kang suggested they team up. The Shatu wouldn't be able to climb the snowy mountain, and they could help him with that. The group's leader invited Lin Huang to join them with open arms, but the young man replied that he didn't like teamwork, preferring solitude. Then one of the players snidely remarked that he shouldn't turn down the offer. They needed his Shatu, and if he didn't join voluntarily, he'd be killed, and no one would even notice. Our hero recalled that the Kui Kang family was of the gold rank, and moreover had connections. It was no surprise that they could afford to behave this way. The squad leader said he really didn't want to do this, but the young man had wasted too much of their time and had to pay for it. Nothing personal. The rest of the players who had been hiding in the shadows immediately stepped forward. They intended to teach Lin Huang a lesson, but they didn't yet fully understand who they were dealing with. As soon as the command to attack was given, the thugs rushed forward. Shatu didn't hesitate either and let out a terrifying roar, stomping his feet. The players landed several blows but missed their target. The monster simply vanished so quickly that no one even noticed. In reality, his master had shattered the card, intending to summon someone far more formidable, but the attackers couldn't have known that either. Hearing that the leader had ordered an attack on the summoner, the young man summoned by and remarked with a smile that it was unlikely anyone would succeed. Just a few sword strikes stopped the first of the guys who had dared to pounce on Lin Huang. The others rushed to their cousin's aid. Now they were far more frightened, for they realized the hero had summoned a completely different creature. Noticing this panic, Lin Huang decided to surprise his enemies even more. He canceled the buy card and summoned the tyrant. The players ran even faster. The new monster appeared right behind them, and its sheer size was literally mind-boggling. The guys couldn't believe that our hero had the ability to summon 3 monsters. It was something out of this world. Tyrant didn't wait long for the right moment, and in just a couple of moves, scattered all of his master's enemies in different directions. As he struggled unsuccessfully to get up, Xiuji hurled a torrent of curses at the young man. The others still couldn't believe that a player who hadn't even reached the Black Steel rank could pull off something like this. The summoned monster growled menacingly behind its master's back, and Lin Huang asked if anyone else wanted to teach him a lesson. Holding his shield in front of him, Zhou Kuikang suggested they settle this amicably. He was absolutely terrified. The squad leader understood that the monster summoned by our hero was at least green copper rank. They wouldn't stand a chance against it under any circumstances. Then the young man asked Tyrant to tone it down a bit. He wanted to hear what these people had to offer. Zhou Kuikang apologized for the misunderstanding, while his cousin hissed angrily that if Lin Huang killed them, he would be blacklisted and fail the exam. The squad leader brushed off this inappropriate comment. He understood that the situation had reached a stalemate for them. He offered the young man compensation in the form of his family's protection and some equipment, but was refused. Our hero pointed his finger at Xuzhi and said that all he needed was some of the scoundrel's gear as compensation for the damage and to recover. The player was outraged, yelling that a useless summoner wasn't worth a penny without his monsters, and that he wouldn't give him a thing. Before the guy could finish speaking, Tyrant's massive hand darted toward the target at his master's command. The shuriken he threw at Lin Huang missed its mark, but our hero grabbed his gun and fired several shots. The bullet hit the scoundrel in the shoulder, and he screamed in pain. Our hero simply said that he shouldn't be underestimated. Xuzhi raised his hand and began begging his cousin to save him, but it was clear from his face that his chances of success were slim. Zhou Kuikang pretended not to hear a thing, though it was clear that this was far from the truth. Meanwhile, Lin Huang moved right up to the enemy and told him he had 3 seconds to follow his order. Pointing his gun at the player, the guy suggested that he say his last words before dying. The thug's eyes widened in fear, but he kept repeating that our hero simply wouldn't dare kill him, or else he'd lose everything. The young man asked what he would lose. The chance to earn a hunter's qualification was important to him, but not that important. He reminded him of what he was capable of despite his low rank, and noted that other companies would go to great lengths to recruit a player like him, and the association itself would be interested and wouldn't change its decision so easily. He was simply too valuable an asset. So, having nearly killed both cousins, the likelihood that Lin Huan would be punished was very low. They would simply turn a blind eye, pretending not to notice. Xuzhi began begging for mercy. The hero pointed the gun at the enemy and calmly told him to count to 3, or whatever he wanted to do. The squad leader screamed in terror that he was willing to do anything if his cousin's life was spared. Now he was truly terrified. Zhou Kuikang begged, promising every possible favor. Xuzhi shouted that he had 4 Black Steel rank items in his inventory and told him to take them all. The young man thought hard. More than anything, he just wanted to pull the trigger right now. But if he killed one of the players, his cousin's family might seek revenge and cause trouble. Besides, killing people wasn't exactly a pleasant activity. Just then, Lin Huang spotted a familiar figure nearby. A voice timidly begged to be saved. It was Yin Yihang, who had emerged from behind a dune. It was clear that the player could barely stand on his own 2 feet. Seeing how far he'd walked across the sand on his own 2 feet, it became clear why the guy was begging for help. Soon he was sitting by the fire our hero had built, recounting what had happened on the way here, and expressing surprise that Lin Huang turned out to be a summoner. Turning a juicy piece of meat on a skewer, the guy asked why his friend was here alone. He thought he had gone with a group of other newbies. Yinhui explained that they had set up camp and were getting ready to sleep, but enraged shadows had come running, and the newbies had scattered in terror. The tyrant was drooling. He was hungry. The guy cut off a mouth-watering piece of meat, saying he was very grateful to his savior. They'd had every chance of dying. He explained that he had obtained the pork using black steel rank devices. It turned out juicy. Lin Huang thought his friend's culinary skills were surprisingly good. At that, Yin Yi's eyes lit up. He declared that he dreamed of becoming a food hunter and chef. It was his life's main goal. The hero dreams of traveling the world in search of interesting monsters, suitable for food and other ingredients to cook incredible dishes. What followed was a fascinating lecture on the characteristics of meat from different regions and cooking techniques. Tyrant couldn't stop drooling. Lin Huang realized that his friend was a decent guy and knew how to cook. He would make an excellent companion if only he could speak a little more quietly and less. Finally, the guys finished eating and set up the tent. Our hero wouldn't let Yin Yi inside, which infuriated the fat guy. He exclaimed that he had lost his tent while fleeing the camp. Surely his friend wouldn't be so cruel as to leave him out in the open in this desert. The young man poked his head out and declared that he refused to let anyone inside because he was used to sleeping alone and wouldn't break that rule. Yin Yi curled up by the fire and began whining that he was just very fat and therefore faced all kinds of discrimination. Meanwhile, Lin Huang assessed the situation. The tyrant looked quite alert, so he could be left on guard. Soon it grew dark. Everything looked more or less calm. No one was lurking in the shadows of the rocks, and he could sleep soundly. Our hero closed the tent flap but kept sniffing around. The smell of roasted meat still lingered, and soon sleep overtook him. In fact, Yin Yi had fallen asleep too. He was snoring loudly, sprawled on his back, and there was absolutely no sign of trouble. Suddenly, the young man was awakened by strange sounds. He thought the fat man had gotten up to eat, but soon realized the footsteps were too heavy. Through the tent fabric, he could make out Tyrant's silhouette, and Lin Huang immediately realized that something unexpected was happening. He darted outside in an instant and nearly screamed at the sight. He had to wake his soundly sleeping partner immediately. Tyrant decided to do it first and roared loudly, counting on the fact that after such an alarm, there would be no misunderstanding. The guy realized they were in big trouble and that fighting made no sense at all. They needed to get out of there as fast as possible. He rushed to help Yin Yi up, but Yin Yi didn't understand why this was necessary, since they were under the protection of such a powerful monster, the leader of the Shatu. Lin Huang started yelling at him to get a move on if he wanted to live. They couldn't waste a single minute. The tyrant wouldn't save them. The fat man never fully woke up and kept whining about having dreamed of a whole roasted piglet. Then his friend had to explain in more detail why they had to wake up immediately and run, though there was really no need for an explanation. A quick glance was enough. A black swarm of flying monsters was rapidly approaching. There were so many of them that in some places they completely obscured the sky. The tyrant grabbed both players and started running. Before the blonde guy could even move, he began screaming in terror. Since Yin Yi was screaming that he didn't want to die and calling for help, Lin Huan had to order the fat man to shut up, as he was attracting even more monsters. The guy knew that these shadowy swarms of creatures were spiritual beings without physical bodies. Hiding from them was practically impossible. This was most likely the end. He'd seen news reports about attacks by similar creatures. People had been found dried out, like mummies, their life force completely drained. Yin Yi finally turned on his brain and realized that even gold-rank hunters were powerless against these shadow swarms. Just at that moment, for some reason, Tyrant decided he didn't want to carry the fat guy anymore and dropped the guy on the ground. Lin Huang considered this unfair and ordered the monster to pick the man back up. The huge hand complied, but they lost time in the process. The giant had to get annoyed and start running. It couldn't be said that this brought him any pleasure whatsoever. Our hero understood that the only chance to survive was to send the examiners a distress signal, but then they would likely be disqualified from the exam. And yet failing the exam was far better than failing his entire mission, or even losing his life. He had to make a decision immediately. The shadow crows were closing in. Their eyes glowed with an ominous red light, and their numbers exceeded all conceivable limits. In the nearby town, everything was quiet. Many were getting ready for bed, while others had long since fallen asleep. Yi Yu poured herself a glass of wine. It had been a tough day, with so many people passing through her hands during the newcomer selection. This time the players were weak. Most of the participants weren't capable of impressing the association, which meant there would be complaints from management again. She had already received several distress signals, And now the call sounded again. Even after midnight, they wouldn't let the witch rest. The girl looked more closely at the map and was greatly surprised. The player who had requested help was moving at a very high speed, unreal for a human. She activated the portal, thinking that only a green copper rank player was capable of such a feat in the desert. Yahello stepped out into the desert, practically certain that some scum had been swallowed by a monster and was now calling for her to save them. The wind ruffled the witch's hair. She peered intently at the desert landscape but hadn't seen anything suspicious yet. Then on the horizon, the silhouette of Tyrant became visible, racing forward with all his might, kicking up a dusty sandstorm behind him. Two guys were sitting on the monster's shoulders, and Lin Huang shouted for the examiner to move them as far away from here as possible. The Tyrant set the hero down, and he continued to shout that they needed to flee as quickly as possible. This time, Yu herself. But the summoned monster didn't quite understand who those words were meant for, causing Lin Huang to curse loudly. The monster tried to escape through the portal and was now simply stuck in it, unable to move forward or backward. The young man smiled and apologized to his monster. He had completely forgotten to shrink it or simply recall it. But in reality, it wasn't Tyrant who needed worrying about. After running through the portal, the guy landed right on top of the witch, knocking her off her feet in the process. After grumbling a bit, the girl sat down on the couch and listened to the story about the shadow monsters. She couldn't believe that the players had been able to run from them for an hour and a half. She skeptically remarked that shats couldn't possibly reach such speeds unless they'd somehow encountered a mutant. Lin Huang understood that his monster wasn't a mutant and that it was all due to the map's mechanics, but he didn't want to give himself away, and besides, he couldn't clearly explain what was happening. Still, Yu decided not to punish the newbies. She said the shadow crows would be cleared out by morning and a request would be sent out right away. The hero thanked her. He apologized for the disturbance, already wondering where else they recruited hunters and held exams for newbies. The witch informed him that once the shadow crows were cleared, the players would be returned to the course. Lin Huang thanked her, but wasn't overly pleased. The wheel of life had been broken once again. He suddenly decided to return his cheat and began insisting that he hadn't called for help. It was a system error. The girl appreciated his quick thinking and suggested they rest for now, and then they would bring them back with the fat guy to take the exam. After waiting a bit, the young man pretended to be overjoyed and asked again if it really was that simple. Yu was a little surprised and asked if he wanted to be disqualified and removed from the test. Realizing it was time to make a run for it, the guy dragged his friend along, wishing the examiner a good rest and assuring her they wouldn't bother her anymore. The guy promised to close the door behind him and immediately vanished. The girl sat back down on the couch, shrugging her shoulders in surprise. It was a good thing the guys hadn't seen her face. Otherwise, their surprise would have been immense. The beauty smiled. Realizing she was alone, the witch laughed with joy. A promising newcomer had appeared, one who could summon monsters. He'd kick everyone else's ass and she'd get the bonus. It was clear outside the door. The desert looked completely safe. Lin Huang couldn't believe that so many shadow crows had been destroyed in literally a minute. Yu proudly announced that they had sent their best hunters, so the guy should continue on his way and quickly raise his rank to at least Black Steel. Finally, she joked that if the player dared to call for help again, she'd bill him for the hotel. He replied that it was a reasonable warning. Yi was glad they'd gotten off with just a scare and asked what the hero had been talking about with the beauty. Deciding it was a dirty innuendo, the guy ordered him to shut up or he'd go on alone. The fat guy got scared and apologized. They needed to figure out what kind of place this was. It turned out that Tyrant had run off about 60 kilometers yesterday, so now they were a little off course. To make up for lost time, the players would have to come up with some kind of trick. Lin Huang began to think about what that might be. The Tyrant carried the players again, but while Yi whined about the heat, our hero tried to find the path to Snow Mountain with the fewest losses. A building appeared ahead. Judging by the map, it was the very house where the examiners had prepared a supply of food for the participants. The fat man shouted that they needed to hurry to the shelter and rest until lunch. But Lin Huang reminded him that there might be other newcomers inside, and since they were enemies, they could attack. Inside, they found supplies of food and water. While his friend rejoiced, our hero continued to urge caution. Upon discovering a stash of his favorite chips, the fat guy started insisting that his companion try them immediately. The guy replied that they would take only what was necessary. They shouldn't break the rules set by the association. Then he noticed signs of other players' presence in the corner of the room and grew wary. It seemed someone had indeed been there before. Within a 100-kilometer radius, this was the only shelter and food storage area. I wonder who they could be. Yinyi replied that he didn't see anything strange about the situation. Lin Huang objected that it all looked suspicious. Valuable items were just lying around, as if they'd been left in a hurry or thrown away because they were no longer needed. Most likely, the players had encountered danger and were forced to flee. The fat man asked not to scare him with such a speculation. Just then, Tyrant's menacing roar echoed from the street. It seemed there really was something to fear here. It was impossible to figure out what was happening, so our hero suggested they leave the place as soon as possible. The tyrant grabbed them and ran off again. Strange sounds came from underground, and the movement of something enormous was clearly audible. This did not escape Lin Huang's notice. He realized that this creature had begun to pursue them, and the fat man panicked even more. Now the sand was rising in waves, as if a huge snake were slithering beneath it. The gentleman ordered Tyrant to be careful and run even faster. It didn't help. A second later, the monster began to sink into the sand, and the people nearly fell off his shoulders from the jolt. The Shatu chieftain's fist struck the ground, as if summoning whoever was there to come out. It was a rash decision. A huge sandworm rose halfway to its full height, bearing all its terrifying teeth. The giant lost his balance and began to topple to the side. He looked utterly tiny compared to his pursuer. Yin Yi and Lin Huang screamed in fear in unison. The boys had never encountered anything like this before. It was a demonic monster, not typical of the Golden Flame Desert, and the boys were on a safe route. How could the death worm have appeared here? Our hero quickly pulled himself together and opened fire on the monster, even though he knew the damage would be like a mosquito bite to it. But the guy aimed for the sensitive mucous membranes inside its mouth, hoping to scare the monster off. The plan didn't work. The worm just got angry and rose even higher out of the sand. They had to come up with a different tactic. The tyrant rushed to flee again. The players panicked. They didn't want to die, but their speed was still insufficient. Suddenly, Lin Huan had a brainwave. He suddenly became serious and calm, ordering the summoned monster to stop and not move. The fat man kept wailing, and his partner ordered him to shut up and stay still too. It was unexpected. The player remembered that the monster had no eyes, no ears, or any other senses. It reacted only to vibration and movement. The blonde guy moaned that he hadn't come across such information in any book about monsters, but soon fell silent anyway. If they didn't move, there was a chance the players would stop being the worm's target, but if it continued to pursue them, they were doomed. Then another good idea came to Yin Yi's mind. He reached into his bag, thinking there might be a way to increase their chances of survival. He tossed a few pieces of meat to the worm to distract it. This would allow them to escape, or at least buy some time. Lin Huan didn't like the fat guy's actions very much. He ordered the kid to freeze and not move. The death worm's enormous maw froze right above the hapless blonde. He wanted to curse, but he couldn't. Suddenly, Yinyi felt himself losing his grip on Tyrant's shoulder and slowly sliding down, as if down a mountainside. The next second, the young man simply fell down, causing his companion to scream in terror at the top of his lungs. It seemed their plan had failed. Having kicked a ton of sand into the air, the fat man stood completely still for a moment, frozen with fear. But worst of all, he was buried up to his neck and now couldn't move even if he wanted to. He began trying to free himself, but could only free his shoulders and arms, after which he simply started calling out to his partner for help, the monster looming directly above him. There was nothing else to do, so Lin Huang ordered Tyrant to save Yin Yi at any cost. He understood perfectly well what that meant, and the monster roared. And yet he carried out the order, lunging straight at the worm and attacking it with his foot. The blow was very powerful and distracted the monster from the player. The huge maw was now aimed at the Shatu leader, and Lin Huang shouted with all his might for his comrade to run. But first he had to free himself from the sand. The player screamed in pain and terror, but still began to gradually free the lower half of his body. To buy him time, our hero began jumping and shouting on Tyrant's shoulder so as not to lose the worm's attention. Meanwhile, the fat man had freed himself, but for some reason he wasn't in a hurry to run. He sat on the ground, nearly in tears, realizing that his partner had sacrificed himself. Meanwhile, Tyrant, with Lin Huang on his shoulder, raced forward at top speed. The monster kept pace. At some point, the guy ordered the summoned monster to drop him and keep running alone. The command was obeyed. After making sure that his master was now far enough away, the Shat sighed and continued to flee, drawing the pursuer after him. As a farewell, Our hero waved to the monster. He understood perfectly well what fate he had condemned it to. Lin Huan truly felt very sorry, and he asked the Shatu chieftain for forgiveness for what he had done. He had no choice but to use Tyrant as bait for the monster. The chase ended, and the giant stopped. His legs were already in the deathworm's enormous maw. The monster let out its final roar, and drops of blood spattered. The summoned monster began to vanish instantly. It was clear that it no longer felt pain, only relief. It's worth remembering that Lin Huang was a summoner, and losing his precious monster was absolutely not part of his plans. The very next moment, the tyrant appeared safe and sound right behind the young man. Everything had ended well. Immediately, the master gave the order to move on. They couldn't waste a single minute, as they had already strayed quite far from the path. His partner ordered the fat man to hurry up, and with a proud expression, strode across the sandy dunes of the Golden Flame Desert. Snow Mountain came into view ahead, which they were about to climb very soon. The only problem was that Yin Yi was nowhere to be seen, which meant that something unexpected had happened. Lin Huang called out to his partner several times, straining his eyes to scan the sands, but he couldn't spot him anywhere. It was a difficult choice, but the boy decided to press on. Perhaps they would meet again ahead. As they moved eastward, he and Tyrant encountered dangerous monsters several times, but each time they emerged victorious from the battles. Nevertheless, the thought that the route planned by the Hunters Association was too difficult never left our hero's mind. The monsters were strong and came in vast numbers. Ever since they were attacked by giant wolves, the young man began to suspect that something was clearly wrong here. Everything was very strange. Nevertheless, they made it to the divine Snow Mountain and began the difficult ascent to the summit. Although it wasn't easy to make that decision, Lin Huang made full use of all the abilities of the summoned creatures at his disposal. The tyrant's size proved unsuitable for climbing the icy cliffs. The heroes suggested to Bai that they share their life energy to help with this difficult task, and the vampire nodded in agreement. He tied a rope around his waist and climbed up first, as if belaying the young man following behind him. But climbing on ice was very difficult for the player. Physically, his body wasn't yet ready for such trials. He constantly told himself to keep going, because this was an opportunity to level up and improve his skills. But these intrusive thoughts disrupted his concentration, and at one inopportune moment, Lin Huang's foot simply slipped off the foothold. He only managed to shout Bai's name before he began to fall, stretching out his arms as if trying to grab at the air. The vampire reacted in time and managed to grab the ice firmly with one hand, while holding on to the rope with the other, preventing the boy from pulling him down after him. That sudden jolt nearly shook the very soul out of our hero. Fear made his heart pound like a madman's, and yet he found the strength to pull himself together. Saying he'd been scared to death, the young man began to climb up after Bai, who was waiting humbly. The vampire could think of nothing better than to hoist Lin Huang onto his shoulders to ensure this wouldn't happen again. And although the player protested and shouted that he didn't want to be a backpack and could climb on his own, no one listened to him. There was nothing left to do but resign himself to the situation and let the summoned monster solve the problem on its own. When it got dark, they decided to stop for a rest and set up camp. They managed to find a suitable ledge on the mountainside. Our hero warmed up some meat cooked by the fat man over the campfire and began to wonder what had happened to Yin Yi. Taking a bite, Lin Huang asked his companion, wherever he might be, not to die. He really wanted to try some more of his dishes. Just then, the guy noticed the vampire moving toward the cliff and asked if he wanted to eat too, more out of politeness than in hope of a positive answer. Before the man could finish speaking, Bai vanished from sight with a huge leap. It seemed something had caught his attention. A short while later, a strange, fluffy, white creature appeared right in front of the player, somewhat resembling a fur pom-pom with sad eyes. It was this creature that the vampire had been chasing, and now he had brought it to his master as an amusing trophy. The guy was delighted. It was a snowball, a harmless, valuable, and rare monster whose value was on par with green copper rank equipment. Lin Huang asked Snowball why he had come closer, simply because he was hungry or because he had caught the scent of meat. The little one made completely incomprehensible sounds, but happily opened its mouth when the young man decided to feed it a little. The hero decided the creature was very cute. No wonder girls loved them so much. But the vampire was a little nervous, even though Snowball looked completely helpless. Meanwhile, the little monster pounced on the food and devoured Lin Huang's entire dinner in an instant. He turned out to be surprisingly nimble and voracious. The guy didn't get angry, but simply patted the little one on the head, telling him that now he could go home. There was no more food. Snowball kept begging and even tried a bite of Lin Huang's pant leg as if it might be edible. Then the monster started dragging the young man aside, as if intending to show him something or give him something. The vampire grew even more wary. The little one was hopping up and down and kept squeaking playfully. Now the young man was very curious to see what it was all about. The little white fluffy ball jumped off the cliff, and our hero told Bai he wasn't busy, so he'd go check it out. Catching up to the little one wasn't so easy. He was making his way through the snow quite nimbly with huge leaps. A snow tunnel appeared ahead, and Lin Huang shouted for Snowball to be careful. If he got buried, it would be hard to dig himself out. The monster didn't listen and went even deeper, after which he completely disappeared from view. The young man hesitated for a long time before deciding to follow him further. Suddenly it dawned on him that this was a passage leading somewhere deeper, and the white ball knew this path well, which was why it acted without fear. And so it turned out. After taking a few more steps forward, the player discovered a portal. Whether to step through it or not, that was the main question. Beyond the passage, which looked like an icy wall, there was clearly something interesting, and curiosity got the better of him. Lin Huang suggested to Bai that they go see what was there. He was the first to step into the portal. The vampire remained cautious and stayed on high alert, ready to react immediately in case of danger. It was so cold on the other side of the wall that our hero felt as if he had dived into an icy pool. A blinding light reflecting off the snow and ice struck his eyes. The young man shielded his eyes and raised his hand. When he decided to open them again and see what lay ahead, he was very surprised. Lin Huang was completely unprepared for this. A snowy mountain landscape unfolded before him, bearing no resemblance to the mountain that the novices were supposed to conquer. It was completely unclear what kind of place this was. But the strangest thing was that Bai hadn't followed his master. It was completely unclear why. Lin Huang muttered in surprise that this couldn't be possible. But Snowball suddenly spoke up and explained that only humans could enter here, not monsters. The hero was very surprised that Snowflake was able to speak human language. But Snowflake didn't think it was anything special. The young man explained that the creature's voice didn't quite match its appearance, which was what struck him as odd. Snowball said that if that was the reason, it would be very easy to fix so as not to embarrass the guest of this world. He began spinning rapidly around his axis, whipping up a veritable snowstorm. It grew bigger and bigger. Lin Huang realized that not only was the air current growing, but so was the monster inside it. Soon, a white fluffy giant with horns on its head appeared and announced that it had decided to reveal its true form to avoid any cognitive dissonance. The boy exclaimed in fear that he hadn't expected to see a snow and ice giant. Now he had to practically shout to be heard. The hero understood very well that such a creature was of an advanced level and very powerful. If it wanted to, the monster could kill him in 3 seconds. He kept looking up in confusion and muttering something incoherent about himself and Snowball. Finally, the giant couldn't take it anymore and asked him not to panic. He wasn't here to harm Lin Huang. It turned out the monster could read minds. The horned creature explained that he had brought the young man here in the hope of asking for his help and receiving it. This surprised our hero even more. He didn't understand how he could help such a huge and powerful creature. It was easier to ask directly, which is what Lin Huang did, after which he looked questioningly at the monster, waiting for an answer. The monster stretched out its enormous hand, and currents of air swirled around the young man once more, as if inviting him to climb up. In the blink of an eye, the boy was standing on the giant's palm, and Snowball asked him to come with him to a certain place. On the way, the giant said he wanted to tell a long story, so the man should be patient and listen carefully. The player understood perfectly well that he didn't really have a choice. Since he was already here, he would have to listen. The ice giant began by saying that in those distant times, when he was very, very small, he had a mistress, the kindest and most beautiful creature in the world. All his fondest memories were connected to this woman, or rather not quite a woman. Lin Huang was surprised that such a monster had been someone's pet. His mistress loved humans and often visited their world, taking the form of a young girl. Snezhka felt lonely without her, but seeing how his mistress's eyes would shine upon her return, he endured it. One day, the mistress fell in love with a mortal. She was ready to do anything to be with him, and it seemed trouble was brewing. When after a long time she returned to the divine snow mountain, it was clear that this was the last time. The pet ran joyfully to his mistress. He had missed her love and light terribly, as well as her games, care, and attention. But it turned out that the lady was mortally wounded and might die. Her lover had done this to her. Upon learning that his future wife was not human, the man had hired killers. They set out to kill her. But the most absurd thing was that during the battle, he himself was seriously injured. To save her beloved, the lady sacrificed her life by removing her own heart. The man survived, but now the beautiful heroine could only lie there awaiting her own death. And the worst part was that Snowflake couldn't do anything to help. Lin Huang sighed. A story with such a good beginning couldn't end badly. The giant added that he had granted his mistress's final wish and lowered her into that icy lake. From that very day, the mountain became Snow Mountain. Now there is no question of the 4 seasons. Only winter exists. The boy asked what the monster wanted from him. If the lady had died so many years ago, was there really anything left to do? Snowball explained that she had said the chosen one would come here. This person would make the ice melt, and then the beautiful maiden would be resurrected. When asked if he really considered him the chosen one, the giant shook his head. He had already brought 3 guys here, but to no avail. The young man asked if the monster brought everyone here indiscriminately and was told that in thousands of years, only 4 young men with kind hearts had come along, and he had risked trusting them. Realizing that he was the 4th, our hero was moved and asked what he must do to melt the ice. The giant replied that a single drop of blood would suffice. He would let the hero go in peace regardless of the outcome, but if it failed, he would erase his memory of this place. It all seemed extremely simple to Lin Huan, so there was no reason to refuse Snow, who had been dreaming of resurrecting his mistress for so long. Turning to the invisible girl, the player dripped blood onto the ice, saying that he truly hoped she would be reborn. The drops shattered into tiny spatters, as if a beautiful red flower had bloomed on the snow. The young man asked what to do next and was advised to simply wait and see if it worked. They sat by the frozen lake for about an hour, but absolutely nothing happened. There wasn't even a hint of movement. Finally, Lin Huang apologized and said that it seemed there was nothing more he could do. The attempt had failed. Immediately after these words, the monster leaped up and stood to its full height. The ice on the lake cracked and began to melt. It all happened so fast that the boy didn't even realize how the water and the beautiful green shore had appeared. The snow was receding, and the plants were coming back to life as well. The hero cried out in fright, not even expecting that his blood was so nourishing that it had given new life to so many flowers. Snowball cried out that he could see his mistress, and a stunningly beautiful girl slowly rose from the water. Staring at her, Lin Huang blushed and seemed to have completely forgotten how to breathe. The lady approached her pet. She called him the Ice King and added that she had missed him very much. The girl thanked the monster for guarding her all this time, and then her chosen one, after which she introduced herself as Shuluo. The hero replied, somewhat embarrassed, that there was no need for thanks. She could just call him Lin Huang. An awkward pause ensued, and the young man apologized for his rudeness, but still ventured to ask if the beauty was a monster. The monster roared that this was unacceptable, but his mistress simply replied that she was of the race of gods who lived 3,000 years ago. The young man only remembered the invasion of the gods 800 years ago. The beauty explained that these self-proclaimed gods were merely servants who had received the pitiful remnants of the blood of the gods to whom she belonged. But they were not weak either. She realized the hero didn't believe her and decided to demonstrate to him the true power of the divine race to which she belonged. Streams of energy began to approach Lin Huan. He had absolutely no idea what to do, whether to try to defend himself or just wait. He began to feel something strange, and then suddenly realized that his broken life wheel was fully functional and restored. The goddess smiled and said she had noticed the hero's little problem and decided to help him out a bit. When asked if divine power was truly that great, the beauty replied that it was far greater. She had a particularly valuable gift for Lin Huang. When the energy surges subsided and the system notifications stopped flashing, the young man read that he had received the full Wild Nature Sword skill card. Unbelievable. It was a very valuable and rare skill. No one had managed to obtain it in its entirety for many years, and the hero appreciated the goddess's magnificent gift. Suddenly, the beauty giggled and remarked that although the player was mortal, he wasn't as simple as he seemed. This puzzled him a little. Finally, the Ice King placed Lin Huang on his palm and promised to return him to where they had met. The young man was extremely pleased. Setting him down on the ground, Snowball said that as soon as our hero left these lands, he and the lady would also leave as far away from here as possible. The goddess explained somewhat sadly that she intended to return to her own world and had no plans to let humans in there anymore. She asked the young man to take care of himself and be careful. He would encounter many more monsters on the Divine Snow Mountain. The beauty warned that the Golden Flame Desert had now become particularly dangerous because exceptionally powerful monsters had awakened underground. They all serve the super monster, which is why all these swarms of creatures are by no means random. We need to stay on our guard. Lin Huang wanted to ask why this had happened and what people should do now, but the goddess chose to remain silent. As a farewell, the boy waved his hand. He was sure he would meet these two again. They parted as friends. When the goddess disappeared, our hero was on the verge of tears. At the very least, he really hoped he would see her again at least once. The divine snow mountain remained just as cold and forbidding as it had been before the player left it. After passing through the barrier, Lin Huang continued to feel the deadly cold, and dawn was approaching. At the entrance, he saw a vampire with a pile of snow already piled up on his head. Don't tell me Bai had been waiting here all night. The guy felt full of energy and announced that they should move on immediately. He was confident he could climb the rock face. And so it turned out. Now the hero could move on his own. He had become much stronger after restoring his life wheel, reaching the black steel rank. They had climbed almost to the very top and were set to make it just in the nick of time before the exam's allotted time ran out. Suddenly, they heard some strange sounds like the quacking of ducks and the croaking of frogs at the same time. Bai grew wary. Around the bend appeared several geese that looked quite good-natured. They were slowly striding toward our heroes. Lin Huang hadn't expected to see geese or swans in the snowy mountains. He didn't know much about local birds, but he still understood that they had no business being there. Nevertheless, the hero suggested to Bai that they take a couple with them. If they roasted them over a fire, they would turn out quite tasty. Suddenly, one of the geese opened its beak, and it became clear that these weren't exactly ordinary creatures, and they certainly didn't feed on grass. Inside was a row of razor-sharp teeth. The monsters immediately began to attack, and the guy had no choice but to run for his life, urging the vampire to hurry up. While Bai scrambled up the sheer cliff, dragging the player behind him on a rope, the player fired back at his pursuers, though there were simply too many of them. The entrance to a cave came into view, and the vampire thought it would make a good enough hiding place. He climbed in himself and began pulling in Huan, who kept firing his pistols non-stop. With one final tug, Bai finally dragged his master inside. The man hit his back hard and stopped shooting. Suddenly, the monster geese let out frightened cries and began scattering in all directions, ceasing their attack on our heroes. It turned out they had been frightened by a huge black sparrow, at least a green copper rank. Now they could relax a little. The bird targeted one of its smaller kin, but it was clear that this was nothing more than an appetizer for it. At first, the player was frightened. He had never seen such a huge sparrow before, but then he began to rejoice, for the geese's attack no longer threatened him and Bai. The joy was short-lived. The monstrous bird's eyes glowed red. Apparently, it had set its sights on a human or a vampire for today's lunch. The monster began circling the cave entrance, and the young man realized they were in for a real fight to fend it off. Huge claws dug into the rocks to widen the passage into the cave and finally reached these appetizing guests of the mountain. Bai looked up resolutely, but Lin Huang told him not to even think about fighting the monster. It would be suicide. It was much safer to attack from a distance, and the boy began firing his cannons again. To his utter amazement, the bullets didn't wound the monster. They didn't even ricochet, but seemed to dissolve upon contact with its feathers. This fact greatly upset the young man. He realized he might very well die, practically right after finishing the exam. Bai muttered something, and this gave Lin Huang pause for thought. Perhaps things weren't so bad after all. While the huge monster kept pounding against the rocks, trying to get at our hero, he managed to come up with a decent plan. He warned Bai that they had to act very quickly and that he should distract the monster's attention the moment he gave the signal. When the monster tried to peer into the cave again, the guy shouted that now was the time. The vampire enveloped the creature in streams of his energy, preventing it from simply flying away and escaping death. Lin Huang rushed forward with all his might to carry out his plan as quickly as possible. He raced like the wind. He had to aim very carefully because the only vulnerable spot on this giant sparrow with steel feathers and iron bones was its eye. And that eye looked fearfully at the man approaching it. The monster seemed to have realized that the final moments of its life had arrived. The next moment, several explosions thundered, and the sparrow let out its death cry. That was the end of its story. The claws clinging to the rocks loosened, and the monster began to fall slowly downward. Now it no longer made much sense. Lin Huang watched it fall, realizing he had used his last 3 bullets, all of which had gone into the bird. Apparently, the sparrow was finally dead, having crashed into the rocks far below. Immediately, an alert sounded. The system reported that a monster superior to our hero in many stats and of a higher rank had been destroyed. As a reward, the hero received a map fragment. It meant that instead of one map, there would be a double map. The assistant explained that rewards are usually distributed randomly, so what happened could be considered a lucky coincidence. A double card meant that everyone the player defeated within the next hour would grant double experience points and loot. Shohei remarked that finding a suitable monster wouldn't be so easy. "Man, what bad luck," the guy brushed it off, saying he wasn't in the mood for jokes. Suddenly, the Emperor's ring vibrated, signaling that the trial was coming to an end. Lin Huang snapped out of it. They'd wasted too much time and needed to finish the climb as soon as possible so they wouldn't be late. They climbed upward quite briskly, but with every new ledge, another one appeared higher up the slope. Looking ahead, the young man decided he had practically no chance of finishing the trial on time. Then a voice from the shadows declared that for losers, life always seems too unfair and difficult. A young man appeared, dressed in shades of blue and light blue. Even his hair shimmered with those colors. It was strange that neither the hero himself nor Bai had sensed his presence nearby. Lin Huang asked who he was, to which he received the reply that he was a test participant just like the player himself. He stepped closer and asked why the young man had killed his Black Sparrow. Our hero was surprised. He realized that his new acquaintance was also a summoner. He had to explain that it was self-defense. If the monster hadn't attacked them, it would have remained safe and sound. The stranger snorted and replied that he had sent his pet out to hunt for food. If it had decided that their party would make good prey, then so be it. Now the young man was going to avenge the killing of his summoned monster, with the help of his colleague, who was of a higher level. He had already raised the corresponding card, but at the last moment he crumpled it up, declaring that he would definitely take revenge, but not now. Later, Bai and his master looked at the idiot with some apprehension. It was strange that he had changed his mind about fighting now. It could very well be a trick. With a green copper-ranked bird perched on his head, the player praised the vampire's skills but noted that Lin Huang himself was still too weak, which was why his monsters couldn't reach their full potential. He promised once again to take revenge, but since he had to finish the exam, time was running out. With those words, the summoner ordered the bird to fly away, which finally infuriated our hero, but in turn gave him a brilliant idea on how to finish conquering the summit. More precisely, his vampire, who continued to look down on the gentleman a bit, was starting to drive him crazy. And yet the spread wings of the enormous bird reminded Lin Huan that Bai could fly too. He immediately pulled a chain from his inventory and chained himself to the summoned monster. The creature clearly didn't like it, but disobeying the order was out of the question. Bai spread his demonic wings and rose into the air, carrying his master with him. The young man was breathless with excitement. First, there was hope that they would make it in time, and second, an incredible sight unfolded below. Skyscrapers came into view. It seemed our hero had indeed arrived at the right district, whose coordinates were marked on the map as the final destination. Landing on the roof in front of the examiner, Lin Huang thanked Bai. The girl greeted the player and remarked that she never would have thought he'd arrive first. You congratulated him on passing the exam, and added that as soon as everyone had finished the test, he could register as a reserve hunter. What he heard greatly surprised our hero. He hadn't expected to be first, let alone to be hired by the association so quickly. The girl didn't understand why Lin Huang was puzzled, and he explained that he was sure the player on the bird with the face of a rich fool would beat him to it. He clarified that the bird was a blood-red dragon. Yu reported that the guy's name was Bai Yang, but he didn't count. Then why was this person among the newcomers? He isn't taking the test, but simply completing a quest, apparently. The beauty explained that the player was passing the trials, but he didn't need an exam. This was a special case. Bai Yang had confirmed his title as a bronze hunter and had insisted on taking the test himself. This information wasn't particularly important, but it still piqued Lin Huang's interest. He hadn't known that was possible. A short while later, the young man checked his inventory and decided to sell some of the loot from the trial. 3.5 million was added to his account, mostly for that very crystal. The guy almost burst into tears. For the first time in his life, he felt like a rich man. As they parted ways, Yahello explained that the hero should stay in this city for a few days to wait for registration and make the most of his time. The gun shop didn't have the right ammunition. The clerk noted that it was too expensive and sent him to his colleague Zhang on the other side of town. The young man stepped out onto the street. This place was larger than the town where he lived, but he couldn't find the rare equipment he was looking for. It seemed he would have to track down that salesman. He had to wander around quite a bit, but the time spent was worth it. As soon as Lin Huang found Zhang's shop, he realized his search had not been in vain. Inside, there was an incredible amount of interesting stuff, though he had to call out to the shopkeeper a few times. Finally, a small, hunched-over old man appeared and told him to quickly grab what he needed, pay, and get out. Our hero explained what he had come for. He doubted the shop would have the right ammunition, but Zhang just asked how much he needed. The guy replied that he needed 3,000 rounds and 300 explosive rounds. The shopkeeper chuckled, saying the hero must be rich. Soon, a beautiful and rather heavy box appeared. It became clear that Zhang wasn't just joking around. The total came to 135,000, and the old man asked for payment right away. Lin Huang agreed and mentioned that he'd come back a little later to place another order. Zhang narrowed his eyes slyly and remarked that he already had enough. But if the young man was interested in other rare items, that wouldn't be a problem either. He should just let him know. The young man thanked him and promised to come back next time. He hadn't expected the seller to be this kind of person at all. Suddenly, a terrifying alarm sounded. When asked what was going on, the old man explained that this was how the association sounded the alarm in case of danger. Saying goodbye, Lin Huang hurried to the exit, saying he'd be back soon, but couldn't continue the conversation right now. The salesman merely watched him go with a keen gaze. It was clear that figuring out this new customer wouldn't be so simple. The huge white church trembled as if it were about to collapse. Its silhouette against the blue sky looked very ominous. Lin Huang began to make his way through the crowd. The exam wasn't over yet, so the city was full of residents and players. Yahello was trying to calm the crowd. A super monster had appeared in the desert, summoning waves of smaller monsters. Many players were in trouble, but measures were being taken. Our hero immediately realized that what the goddess had warned about had happened. For everyone's safety, they were asked to wait out the threat in the city. One of the guys shouted that he didn't want to stay here and just wait. He could be useful. Lin Huang appreciated his courage. The examiner explained that for berserker monsters, active both on the ground and in the air, guys like him were just lunch. The association was saving them by not sending them out into the desert. The girl asked which of them wanted to die first. There was no answer, but our hero did have a few thoughts. The association sent a special task force to mop up the area. As soon as the main monster was destroyed, the rest would die too. Lin Huang thought it would be great if everything turned out to be that simple. In that case, there would be no need to worry. Then Bai Yang appeared, saying that another super powerful monster could very well be lurking behind the first one, in which case the squad's strength wouldn't be enough. He added that he wasn't going to sit here like an idiot and wait to die, while Yahello reassured everyone that everything would be fine by tomorrow. Lin Huang thought intently. Even if Bai Yang was provoking the players, what he said wasn't without merit, so our hero decided to speak with the examiner. First and foremost, he was concerned about the fate of the fat guy Yin Yi. It was him the guy asked the association worker about. The beauty replied that she remembered that oddball well. Not long ago, he had pressed the button and sent a distress signal. This cheered Lin Huang up. Apparently, he had worried for nothing. Yahello turned and walked away, asking the player to hurry up and find a safe place to spend the night. He nodded. A fierce battle was raging in the desert. The flames blazed so brightly that they could be seen from miles away. Our hero sat on the windowsill, thinking about how a super squad of hunters was currently battling super monsters. It was truly epic. The guy felt that it wasn't quite fair to rely on someone else's skill and combat power rather than his own. Lin Huang fell asleep while looking out the window. He was awakened by the cold morning rain, which began to pour down in buckets. Suddenly, the young man's eyes widened in horror as the piercing alarm sounded again. He looked ahead and saw a mountain engulfed in flames, as if a volcanic eruption had begun. The young man stepped out into the hallway. A group of hunters was running past, discussing the need to summon Li Lan as soon as possible. When asked what had happened, one of the men replied that the situation had reached a boiling point. He should hurry to the temple and hide there. It turned out that the super hunter was dead. In the battle with the monster, the beast had proven stronger, and now it was completely unclear what to do. Inside, chaos reigned. People were trying to assert their rights and demanding to be let out so they wouldn't be locked up, waiting to die. Our hero preferred to keep quiet and just listen as Yahello explained that it was the player's duty to protect the population from monsters, and there were a lot of monsters right now. Many newbies started begging to leave. They were afraid they'd be ordered to fight alongside the other hunters. Lin Huang told them to shut up. He was tired of listening to this cowardly whining, and the young upstart didn't like the request. Our hero told them about the monsters he'd encountered in the Golden Flame Desert. They'd all been summoned by a super monster, so leaving the building was too dangerous. The guy asked how long Yahello would last outside. She was roughly gold ranked and clearly the most competent of those present. She replied that at best until tomorrow night, because there were many dangerous monsters in both the desert and on Snow Mountain, and their numbers were growing. Then Lin Huang announced that he himself wouldn't last even 3 hours, so the rest of them should sit tight and keep quiet. One of the newbies declared that he was a lucky guy and was sure he'd survive simply because he was born under a lucky star. Our hero finally lost his nerve and decided to take control by jumping up onto the platform next to the examiner. He shouted that even if they all consecrated this place right now and prayed to the gods with all their might for help, nothing would come of it. As soon as the monsters roll over the mountain, every single one of us here will be doomed to certain death, so running away isn't an option. The guy pointed at a few newbies and asked what they personally could do to help the Hunters Association. He suggested joining forces and working together to defend the Snow Mountain area from the monsters that continue to advance. Several men immediately jumped on board with this idea and began chanting that they would protect their families in the Snow Mountain area. Bai Yang turned around and headed for the exit, muttering that a bunch of idiots had decided to commit mass suicide. Lin Huang noticed this and called out to the player. He clearly remembered that this guy was of a much higher rank than the rest of the people here. Yahello hugged our hero and thanked him for the idea of joining forces. Now they really had a chance of winning. The order was given to go get their gear and then return here to register for the raid. Lin Huang was about to jump down from the platform to go and get ready as well, so he warned the examiner about it. She asked the young man to wait a moment. It seemed things were far from as simple as they might appear at first glance. The young man looked questioningly at Yahello. It seemed he was about to hear some truly important information. The hunter explained that she could transport no more than 50 people at a time, so her first priority was to send away those under the age of 20. Lin Huang was outraged. After all, she had supported his idea to fight, but it turned out that was only to calm people down. Soon this place would turn into hell, and no one would survive. The beauty shouted the last sentence so loudly that it became clear she herself could no longer control her emotions from the horror. Yahello explained that the association had mobilized all its resources to hold back the monsters, but even that would last for 10 hours at best. After that, the monsters would destroy both this place and everyone who didn't manage to teleport in time. The girl explained that she herself would die here, defending the organization's honor, but before that, she would evacuate the young blood, the players who would become the association's bright future. Hearing that people like him would survive at the expense of the others, the young man shouted that he wasn't going to leave this place either. He shouted that everything he had said was serious, not just to calm people down, because he really would fight. The guy added that just sitting around and waiting for the super players to arrive and defeat the super monster wasn't an option, but there was no need to run away either. Yidui Ashu shouted that with their strength and equipment, the players and hunters who had been here for a long time wouldn't last. Lin Huang objected, saying that if there was a chance to hold out, it shouldn't be ignored. The civilians should be evacuated, and the hunters, who were practically rookies, should be fought off to protect the area. Hearing that they only needed to hold out for a couple of days, the beauty remembered the tunnel in the mountain, which could serve as an excellent hideout. Our hero put his arm around the girl's shoulders and gently assured her that he would help her with everything. She could count on him. The guy kept singing sweetly, which made the examiner a little embarrassed, and yet she really was starting to like him. The hunter pulled herself together and asked him not to stray from the plan. They were talking about saving 20,000 people. There was no time for jokes in such circumstances. Yahello walked down the hallway, thinking that they all had to survive because this player was truly one of a kind. Soon, a crowd of thousands made their way through the gorge into the mountains to take shelter in the very hideout the examiner had mentioned. Many were nervous, but they were reassured by the fact that there were hunters here capable of protecting the civilians. Our hero stared intently ahead. Julie Yuguang and Wang Lena had skills well suited to organizing the operation, as the newcomer walking ahead reminded them. All three of these players nodded happily. Their small squad looked like a pretty good fighting unit together. Then the girl with the gift of foresight froze. When asked what was happening, she replied that she was trying, but could see only horror. They pressed forward. Everything around them was littered with the remains of monsters. There were so many that every step brought a new discovery. The newcomers discussed how the professional hunters had really gone all out, leaving them no chance to encounter any monsters. It seemed they were very strong, Lin Huang asked the guys not to be too careless. According to his information, new monsters were appearing constantly, and they shouldn't let their guard down. They needed to distract the monsters so that the evacuation of civilians could proceed as smoothly as possible. He hadn't even finished speaking when he lunged forward and shielded his colleague with his body. It seems someone had decided to attack this group of players, but the others hadn't reacted in time. Right where Julie had been standing just moments ago, an axe was now stuck in the ground. The weapon clearly hadn't fallen from the sky. The enemies were nearby. Our hero began looking around and shouted for everyone to group up. They were under attack. Soon the monsters appeared in all their glory. The sight was not for the faint of heart. Even Lin Huang himself was seriously frightened. They were demons with the heads of cows and surprisingly powerful muscles, armed mainly with axes and chains. But the main danger was that there was a whole herd of these ferocious warriors here, each one looking as if it were ready to tear the players to pieces. The guys assessed the enemy's strength, black steel, and there were plenty of them. Their chances of victory were practically zero. Only Lin Huang remained calm. He urged them not to panic. The young man decided to first strip the demons of their main motivation and thoroughly dampen their fighting spirit. Yu Guang was to cover his incredible sword attack with magic. This would allow them to fend off the first assault. The severed horns flew straight at the bespectacled man, but he was quite effective at firing magic arrows at the cows. This allowed him to strike their most vulnerable spot, the eyes, so that Lin Huang could break through and finish the job. Julie was ordered to set traps, while Wang Lan was tasked with ensuring the girl remained unharmed. The heroine immediately activated her magic staff. Terrifyingly loud sounds began to emanate from it, nearly knocking her off her feet. Not to mention the demons who lost the ability to move. They clearly weren't prepared for such a cunning move, and neither were the raid members. At the same time, setting traps became much easier, since all the monsters' attention was focused on resisting the magic. Lin Huang decided to use the encounter with the demons to test all the new capabilities of his sword. He was impressed. The 18th style had become the 36th, the blade obeying as if at the command of its owner's heart, destroying enemies with a single strike. But there was no time to relax, because one of the demons had already planned an attack from above, aiming straight for the young man's head. He continued to marvel at the possibilities that had opened up in the appearance of his shining sword, which had attained legendary status. The young man managed to react, destroying the demon in a flash. Those who sought death got what they wanted. It was far more effective than firing pistols. Yu Guang praised Lin Huang's sword technique, but he was quickly reminded that it was time for him to join the battle himself. Just at that moment, both the cow boss and his smaller minions had fallen into traps and were easy targets. The newbies were fired up. Now each of them could show off all their best combat skills and tricks. Meanwhile, our hero continued to swing his sword, collecting more and more map fragments for killing monsters that outleveled him. An option to transform into a black steel-level demon with a cow's head appeared, but it wasn't clear what exactly that meant. It turned out that for 24 hours, he could take on the form of any summoned monster, but this card could only be used once. The prospect of taking on the form of a huge and powerful creature was very tempting, but it also frightened our hero. But worst of all, these thoughts consumed him so completely that the young man forgot he was on the battlefield. Drops of blood splattered on him and brought him back to reality. Fortunately, Lin Huang was unharmed. Someone had shielded him. The enormous demon, which had intended to attack the young man, collapsed dead with a terrifying crash. Bai had helped his master stay alive, but now he looked at him with a slight reproach, as if accusing him of being too carefree. That look spoke volumes, so the player began to make excuses and thank the vampire for saving him. The rest of the guys were doing quite well. Everyone managed to find a suitable tactic and destroy quite a few monsters. The monsters were much stronger and faster, and at first this frightened the players. But as things went on, they got the hang of it. The only thing that scared them was the sheer number of new enemies. But Lin Huang took them all down in a flash with his sword, naturally not without Bai's help. The guys were impressed. 20 demons in a couple of seconds was an incredible feat. The hero noted that this wasn't the time to relax. They needed to head toward the pass into the mountain range. The players agreed. Now they even wanted to face the monsters to improve their skills. Suddenly, the Imperial ring vibrated. The signal came from Yahello, which meant it was something extremely important. The girl asked somewhat anxiously about the squad's whereabouts. They were taking quite a while. Lin Huang replied that there had been a small skirmish, but everything was fine. They should arrive at the location in 2 hours. The others were surprised by his manner of speaking to the examiner. His smile did nothing to reassure Yahello. She remained tense and informed them that they had only 1 hour to arrive. The monster invasion was gaining new momentum, and if they didn't make it in time, they were guaranteed to die. The situation at the entrance to the gorge was extremely tense. Too many monsters and demons were appearing, and even the best hunters couldn't neutralize them all in time. Yahello fought like a woman possessed, swinging her whip and killing several monsters at a time, but even that wasn't enough. Less experienced players were dying practically right before her eyes, just a few meters away. A colleague with a rifle shouted that they wouldn't last long. Too many people were seriously wounded or killed, and the girl ordered them to retreat. The man pointed out that as soon as they retreated and blocked the entrance to the gorge, the people outside would be doomed. Yahello replied that she would stay here until the end, with those who chose to remain. A bloodied hyena came out to meet the hunters, and it was obvious that its pack would soon follow. The players recoiled in horror. Going up against monsters of this level was pure suicide. The examiner was determined. She shouted that they had no choice but to fight, but a colleague remarked that even she was in over her head. The girl gave the order to advance. Her colleagues shouted that they wouldn't let her, the squad leader, die. In truth, no one wanted to die. Suddenly, half the pack of hyenas froze in place. The beasts had caught a new scent and turned their attention to it. When Yahello looked in the right direction, she was overcome with incredible joy. Now there was a chance to escape. It was Lin Huang with Tyrant. The young man had not only survived, but had also arrived in time to come to their aid. Our hero immediately rushed into the attack, but the bloodthirsty hyena clamped down on his sword with such force that there was no way to free the blade and fight. The hero shouted for Yu Guang and Wang Lan to tend to the wounded, while he and Zhu Li would deal with the monsters. The others agreed. The player had already managed to retrieve his sword and was now chopping down the hyenas like cabbage, while his comrade and Tyrant covered the leader from the attacks of the other beasts. The third-level black steel hyenas seemed like an excellent opportunity for our hero to improve his sword-fighting technique. He mentally ordered the pack leader to come closer. In this battle, only one of the two was destined to survive. The beast seemed to have heard his thoughts and lunged into the attack, making an incredible leap. The man did not frighten it at all. Lin Huang was a little surprised. He noticed that the hyena's rank was gradually changing, randomly rising and falling. The enormous monster pounced on our hero and pinned him to the ground with its clawed paw, intending to have a hearty meal. The guy remained calm. The only thing that bothered him in this situation was the huge hyena's foul breath. His partner wanted to help the boss, but another monster attacked him. There was absolutely no room for distraction. Julie dealt with the small hyena fairly quickly. He was already quite confident in taking down these creatures, but he was still worried about Lin Huang. Yahello kept a cool head. She suggested that the player deal with the smaller hyenas first and only then take on the pack leader. Our hero had already freed himself and continued fighting the blood hyena. Tyrant was also actively helping to destroy the enemies. The pack leader was not only strong and fast, but also intelligent enough to retreat at the most opportune moment. Lin Huang noticed that intelligence wouldn't save the monster from certain death. As a summoner, he had studied monster psychology well. He played a card, and a bright blue glow instantly destroyed several hyenas. It seemed the right skill had been activated. The young man summoned Bai again, and now the fiery whirlwind killed one hyena after another in literally a matter of seconds. The vampire and the main monster also took a hit, but the blood hyena was a very strong opponent, so it didn't die right away. When it finally happened, Lin Huang realized he had outsmarted and overpowered it. He received another fragment of a rare skill card. The other players were thrilled. It was incredible. The examiner was now smiling, praising the sword technique the boy had used. The girl began to praise the hero, but he reminded them that they should hurry before the blood hyenas recovered. His companions thanked the young man with smiles. He had made it in time, otherwise no one would have survived. Yahello ordered everyone to move toward the entrance of the gorge, heal up as much as possible, and boost their stats. They needed to be well prepared. Suddenly, Lin Huang noticed a new group of enormous monsters approaching them. He asked to be woken up if this was a dream. They were giant spiders, and there were so many of them that it was impossible to count them. The examiner replied that it wasn't a dream. Unfortunately, the super monster continued to spawn new creatures. A new wave of the monster invasion was approaching, and by all accounts, it was far more dangerous than all the previous ones. If the spiders kept moving at the same speed, the hunters would have no more than 10 minutes to prepare. Panic set in. Many decided that the easiest thing to do was to flee, because fighting in this situation was simply madness. Lin Huang reminded them that escaping this way wouldn't work anyway, and that they needed to fight the monsters. Yi Yu supported him in this decision. Their teammates realized they could be useful and decided to stay and fight as well. They were confident that, together with our hero and the examiner, they had a chance. Julie suggested that he could organize a retreat into the gorge and cover the others while our heroes dealt with the creatures. They could also drop rocks on them. The leader liked the idea and the fighting spirit, and she gave the appropriate orders. They had to act immediately. Lin Huang promised he could handle it. Yi Yu didn't want to leave the players without support, but the guy reminded her that she was the only commander here and had to take care of everyone else. She couldn't leave 2,000 locals unprotected. The girl was on the verge of tears, but agreed that he was right. Calling on everyone who wasn't afraid of death to follow him, the young man charged forward at the spiders to buy Yi Yu some time. The girl watched them go, as if seeing them for the last time. It was quite possible that this was indeed the case. But then the beauty pulled herself together and ordered them to hurry. They had little time, and their comrade's sacrifice must not be in vain. Her thoughts were gloomy, but still, if there was a chance to carry out their plan, they had to try not to let it slip away. Lin Huang had already brought his sword down on the first monster, shouting that he wasn't going to die here over such nonsense. The young man dealt with the first wave of spiders and immediately summoned Xiaohe. He needed to consult with him. The assistant appeared, saying he was being summoned in a critical situation. As always, the hero replied that he wanted to use the card he'd received for the blood hyena. The assistant carried out the order, reminding him that the card might activate randomly, so he couldn't guarantee the player's safety. The decision was made and Lin Huang immediately activated his transformation skill. Everything around him was flooded with green light. It turned out to be the skill of invisible snow walking, one of the rare rank, gold-level skills of the hyena. The card proved very useful, allowing the young man to move through space at incredible speed as he killed the spiders one after another. This was enough to thin their ranks considerably. Now the young man with his sword was particularly effective. His companions didn't understand who our hero was talking to, but they couldn't help but notice that his movement speed had become simply fantastic. Soon the skill's power waned because his energy was running out. He needed to replenish it urgently, and the spiders began their assault. Lin Huang realized he had to switch to a different skill and turned to Xiaohe for help again. Xiaohe reminded him that it was possible to feed one skill with the life force of another, but he had to choose which one to sacrifice. The assistant read out the entire list of stats that could be disabled to free up some energy. A decision had to be made immediately. The guy shouted that it didn't matter what to reduce. The main thing was to strengthen the sword, because killing spiders had to be as efficient as possible. Then Xiaohe announced that he would reduce the connection. It wouldn't be critical in this situation and would free up a lot of life energy. Now Lin Huang would be able to survive this difficult situation. The main thing was that a new wave of creatures didn't arrive. The hero was the only barrier standing in the spider's way. The battle lasted an incredibly long time, and yet our hero prevailed. By the next morning, all the spiders had been killed. Yi Yu and the others had managed to block the gorge with hyena corpses and rocks, and were now calling the players and our hero over to them to recover. The guy was truly exhausted and very tired. He didn't listen to Julie's praise and just wanted to rest until new monsters appeared. He thought of his sister and silently promised her that he wouldn't let the monsters destroy the city. Suddenly, the imperial rings vibrated violently. Judging by the signs, there was no good news to be expected. Moreover, the signal reached all players at the same time. It seemed something was happening on a nationwide scale. It was reported that several areas of District 7 had been overrun by berserker monsters, 3 cities had been destroyed, and there were many casualties, but the hunters had managed to stabilize the situation. The players' relatives and families were there. While they were exploring the mountainous area here, everyone was worried. But as fate would have it, Yi Yu and Lin Huang, along with the others, ended up here. They must destroy the super monster. It became clear who the monster's main target would be. Both heroes realized this quite clearly, almost simultaneously. The fortification they had built was quite substantial and could well hold off a new wave of the monster invasion. The only question was whether the players could hold out here until the super hunters arrived. According to preliminary estimates, they would arrive by evening. Yi Yu angrily declared that she had not feared death since the moment she became a hunter, but she was terrified by the thought of civilian casualties. We cannot allow the deaths of 20,000 residents. Our hero's hand gently rested beside the girl's. He confidently stated that she was already a gold-ranked player, so no monsters should be a problem. The beauty realized the guy was right. All they could and must do was not lose their fighting spirit and keep fighting. They needed to pull themselves together and protect those who needed protection. Lin Huang thought he'd gone a bit too far and felt embarrassed. The enemy invasion had begun, and the situation was heating up. It wasn't easy for the other players to pull themselves together either, but new trials lay ahead. Both our hero and Yahello watched in horror as what was rushing toward them at breakneck speed. Now the defensive structure could be considered useless. The mammoth monsters charging along the gorge could easily tear the structure apart in a matter of seconds. These were battle mammoths clad in steel armor. With their tusks and foreheads, the beast could easily crush even the rocks. The examiner was fully aware of the threat and began to get angry. Lin Huang also didn't know what to do. The girl noticed that this type of monster was designed to break through walls. Half of their bodies were made of metal. The only option was to take a risk and defend their fortifications. Suddenly, our hero noticed that some object was rapidly approaching the herd from the air. When the hunter looked in that direction, she couldn't believe her eyes. It seemed she recognized someone. A player was rushing toward the monsters. A young man with light hair shrouded in a blue glow. In his raised hand was a sword, and sparks of energy were literally shooting from his eyes. A sign of nothing good for the mammoths. The hunter's strike was so powerful that it pierced the monster's steel armor, sending a fountain of blood spraying out. The choice of target was excellent. The eyes were indeed the monster's most vulnerable spot. Lin Huang realized that the player before him was at least a gold-tier player. The young man pushed off from the fallen enemy and leaped. There was no doubt he would land on a new victim. And so it happened. A swing of his sword bathed everything around him in blue, and once again, the area around yet another mammoth was drenched in blood. The number of dead monsters was rapidly increasing, and Yahello explained that this was Yi Cheng, not just a gold-rank hunter, but one of the 11 geniuses, practically a super hunter. As soon as the warrior destroyed one mammoth, he immediately switched to the next. The creature's glowing red eyes made for excellent targets. The enormous giants crashed to the ground with a terrifying roar, sending tons of dust and rocks flying into the air. Yijing flew from one to the next like a circus acrobat. It seemed he knew neither fear nor fatigue. Soon, the player swung his sword one last time. It seemed the threat of the fortifications being destroyed had been eliminated. Yahello rushed toward the young man with a smile, greeting him as if he were an older brother. Lin Huang realized they knew each other. But getting too close was dangerous. The last mammoth could very well have crashed right onto the beauty. She waited until the carcass had fallen and Yijing had safely climbed down, then ran to the young man. The girl didn't hide her joy, but the hunter just sighed heavily. It seemed he knew more than our heroes did. Finally, the guy turned and said that the danger wasn't over yet. They wouldn't be hearing the all clear anytime soon. In the rays of the sun, a group of new monsters appeared on the horizon, and there were a great many of them. It seemed this was yet another wave of the invasion. They were spiders again, but this time much larger, apparently a special species, and their sheer number was literally mind-boggling. Yahello explained that these were black sand spiders, and our hero recalled that they create special webs. Yixing explained that they weren't particularly strong opponents. Apparently, the super monster wanted to use their sturdy webs to bring down the walls. The hero noted with regret that a single massive cannon would be enough to wipe out this entire army of monsters. Unfortunately, there was no suitable weapon to be found in this area. The examiner replied that it was too early to panic and immediately activated her inventory. A yellow glow flared in her hand. A second later, a gigantic rocket launcher appeared in the beauty's hands, so heavy that even holding it aloft required effort. Her colleague expressed doubt that the girl had a certificate for handling heavy weapons. How had she even bought this weapon? Lin Huang simply gazed at her in awe. Yahello replied that if you have the money, anything is available on the black market, even a gold-rank cannon. But this wasn't the time to be a bore, it was time to act. At that very moment, the hunter activated the weapon and fired. The recoil nearly knocked her off her feet. For some reason, the rocket didn't hit the spiders but struck the rocks instead, leaving a trail of flames in its wake. It exploded immediately and everything shook. Yijing laughed and said that, as expected, the beauty had missed her target. She suggested they just watch what would happen next. The rocks cracked, then began to sway, and soon streams of snow poured through them, a veritable avalanche. The spiders were simply buried and crushed. They didn't have time to hide or save themselves by releasing their webs. Yijing was very serious and asked Lin Huang to remember forever that one must never underestimate women, but it's better not to get involved with them. The guy immediately understood what he meant. While Yahello was glad that no one would be lecturing her now, shadow crows appeared through a gap in the rocks. Many shadow crows. The guys rushed forward to get a better look. Both cursed. Now the situation was rapidly escalating. The more intently the players peered into the distance, the more terrified they became, because this time there were far more monsters, and their weapons were powerless against them. Lin Huang decided that the apocalypse had begun. So many shadow monsters simply wouldn't leave a single living soul in this world. But the most terrifying thing was that, along with the crows, other incorporeal monsters were approaching. They simply walked on the ground, which is why they weren't as noticeable. These were the demons we already knew, with the heads of cows and horses. Their mood was far from cheerful, for their main driving force was revenge. The team of newbies didn't hold back in their expressions. Everyone was scared to death and didn't know what to do next. Our hero whispered that they were doomed. Yicheng ordered Xiao Yu to open the corridor of green doors. He insisted that the girl teleport the players out of there. They held great promise and were destined to become humanity's hope. The beauty declared that she wouldn't leave this place. Her colleague was much stronger, so he was the one who had to escape. There was no room for discussion. It turned out the players were brother and sister, which is why they were arguing so fiercely, caring for each other. Meanwhile, Lin Huang summoned his assistant, who asked what his last words would be. He reported that he had defeated many monsters of a higher level than his own, and asked how many cards had been collected. It turned out to be over 1,000. The young man wanted to use them all, but that was impossible, so he decided to activate them one at a time at random until he found one that was truly worthwhile. The young man suddenly realized that even if he found one, he might not be high enough level to use it. The thought of that was unbearable. And yet Lin Huang announced that since all roads lead to death, he intended to take the risk and activate all the cards at once. The assistant carried out the order, and now a whole wheel of glowing yellow rectangles had unfolded around him. When a single one froze briefly in the center, the player decided to choose that very one. He shouted that it didn't matter what card it turned out to be, the assistant must use it immediately. A message appeared stating that the owner had played all 1,245 of his cards, and a single small unidentified card appeared. All other unplayed rewards were reduced to 0. The card began to approach the young man's forehead, and a fireball appeared around it, constantly growing larger. Soon the entire player was engulfed in flames. Fueled by his life force, the ball grew larger and larger. The players couldn't see a thing. The blinding light was agonizingly bright, as if it were capable of destroying all life. But in reality, its target was the shadow monsters and demons. They all froze in place, staring at this ball, which was larger than the sun. Very quickly, the searing flame reached them, sweeping away everything in its path in a flash. The land demons were the first to perish in the torrent of light, followed by the shadow crows. They crumbled to ashes. The players screamed in horror as the light touched their skin, but they still managed to open their eyes. The glowing sphere began to gradually shrink, but it still shone just as brightly, the last monsters disappearing in its rays. Yahello was still expecting death. She squeezed her eyes shut tightly and clenched her teeth, but with every passing second, she realized she was still alive. Finally, the beauty risked opening one eye, because it had become surprisingly quiet around her, and she hadn't felt any pain. It was all over. Then the girl's eyes widened. She looked toward the center of this radiant apocalypse. Now there was only our hero, who was so exhausted that he had to lean his hand against the ground. The examiner called out to Lin Huan. Following her, the other players began to repeat the boy's name. They were very grateful to the young man for saving them and admired his strength. Our hero paid no attention to the crowd's enthusiastic shouts. All he cared about was the chance to use that incredible card once more. His thoughts were interrupted by Yahello's passionate embrace. She didn't hide her emotions, which thoroughly embarrassed the player. Yijing asked if Lin Huang had really just used a divine spell. Lin Huang hesitated, not knowing how to explain what had happened. His sister asked the hunter not to jump to conclusions. He shouldn't look down on anyone capable of surprising him, just as no one doubted Yijing's strength. For a while, both were silent. The pause was quite tense, but family ties had done their work. The beauty laughed, and the young man noticed that she had changed lately. Lin Huang was puzzled. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed movement among the rocks. A strange energy was emanating from that spot. Yahello also looked in that direction, sensing the strong, dark aura of a creature among the rocks. There could be no mistake. Yixing sighed. Their main enemy had finally revealed itself. It was that very super monster that sent forth monsters. The hooded demon snarled maliciously that he never would have thought he'd encounter a true descendant of the gods in a place like this. Lin Huang was stunned. For a moment, he didn't even realize they were talking about him. His girlfriend had warned him to be careful. Their enemy was treacherous. The super monster's presence was sapping the player's vitality. It had become hard to breathe. Why had the super hunter been gone so long? The villain smiled, saying it didn't matter how strong the super hunter was. No one could compare to him. Humans were pathetic losers. He looked at Lin Huang and the brother and sister, who had assumed fighting stances, and declared that he could give these kids a chance. If they handed over our hero to him, he would spare the lives of everyone present. It was a simply magnificent deal. Let them agree. For a while, the enemy stood there watching the players, waiting to see what decision they would make. The people remained silent. Then he reminded them that trading one person for the lives of 20,000 others was a very tempting offer. Yu didn't know what to do. Her brother explained that if Lin Huang, the heir to the divine race, were eaten by the demon would gain all the power of the gods and merge it with its own. The super monster added that when the super hunter arrived, they would have to deal with the clones that would soon appear, and it wasn't certain that this would be pleasant entertainment. He also remarked that 20,000 people wouldn't be enough to satisfy his appetite, and licked his lips greedily. The players froze in horror. Xiaohui appeared and told the master that the offer was too tempting to refuse. The young man asked if he had a chance of defeating the monster. The assistant replied that with his combat skills, such a confrontation was tantamount to certain death. There was nothing to even think about. Suddenly, Yahello quietly said that she agreed. The girl's voice was breaking and trembling badly. Her brother tried to stop her, but the hunter repeated that she was willing to trade one person's life for 20,000 others. This shocked Lin Huang so much that he simply opened his mouth and couldn't utter a sound. Xiaohui said goodbye and vanished. The girl asked for a moment alone with the boy, since he was doomed anyway. The monster agreed because he wouldn't let her pull any tricks right under his nose. The examiner asked her brother to go with her as a cover. He couldn't figure out what the girl had in mind, but agreed. They took each other's hands and headed toward Lin Huang, accompanied by the disapproving and frightened glances of the other students. When the girl approached our hero, she simply stared at him for a moment, hesitating to speak. Her brother was also in no hurry to break the silence, and the three of them simply looked at each other, the tension palpable. Finally, Yahello decided to take the young man's hand, almost exactly as he had done for her recently during a difficult moment. She said they hadn't known each other for very long, but from the very beginning, our hero's courage, strength, and character had filled her with admiration. Both guys froze. Was she really about to confess her feelings right now? It was very unexpected. The beauty added that she wasn't sure if they would ever have the chance to meet again, so she wanted to confess her feelings. She was happy that he had come into her life. Yahello immediately apologized for her persistence and added something else about recent events. Her brother and Lin Huang were surprised. There was something suspicious in her voice. A portal was already glowing behind them, and with a wave of her hand, the girl pointed the players in the right direction. Both began to fall backward. The young people shouted. They finally understood what the hunter had in mind and had no intention of submitting to her will. She smiled gently and announced that she was leaving the future of all humanity in their hands. The teleportation was about to begin. But the super monster had no intention of letting its prey slip through its fingers so easily. It cursed and immediately began casting a spell. Black lightning shot from him toward the players. Lin Huang and Yijing saw it, but could do nothing. This dark energy shattered the portal, an explosion roared, and it was only by a miracle that the boys remained unharmed. Then everything was engulfed in pink smoke. It looked very ominous, but there was no way to understand what was happening. Then a bolt of lightning pierced Yahello's chest. The girl's eyes flew open as she realized these might be her final moments. Her brother screamed. He couldn't let her die so foolishly, sacrificing herself without saving anyone. And yet, while the beauty was still alive, she cursed and began to fall onto her back, realizing what a foolish position she had found herself in. Her plan had failed. The examiner collapsed onto her back and remained completely motionless for a moment. Both players rushed to her. Yijing called out to his sister, and she whispered his name. It seemed the blow wasn't fatal, at least not yet. Yahello sighed loudly and apologized for still being too weak to handle a problem of this kind. Lin Huang was furious. Tongues of flame appeared around his body once more. The boy's sole desire was to kill the super monster. He called the girls stupid and ungrateful. They had treated her with respect, and in return, they were met with an attempt to deceive them. Shouting that the punishment for such an act was death, the monster began to transform. Its skull literally cracked and split in half. A huge snake slithered out and hissed that everyone here would die now. Its patience had run out. The monster was incredibly large, simply gigantic. People looked like ants next to it. All the players were so terrified they couldn't even put it into words. They had never encountered anything like this before. The monster opened its mouth wide and shot its tongue toward Lin Huan. Everyone else interested it far less. Soon, the boy was tightly bound and lifted into the air, having lost any chance to resist. He dangled helplessly at the level of the monster's head high above. It was obvious that something terrible was about to happen. Yeoyu's brother shouted. He wanted to make sure the player hadn't suffocated yet, but there was no response. The super monster hissed that merging with it was a great honor for a descendant of the gods. He should be proud of himself. Lin Huang continued to choke. He knew he was about to die, but there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. The serpent clicked its teeth. There was no turning back now. The worst thing that could happen had happened. People watched the monster and waited for it to become even stronger and more terrifying because of the divine energy. But most of all, they felt sorry for our hero. Yi whispered the boy's name and closed her eyes. She was too weak even to cry. The snake with Lin Huang in its mouth hissed that the player would now merge with it into a single entity. Let everyone watch closely. For some reason, the super monster couldn't swallow the boy or even move its jaws. Soon it realized it couldn't move at all. A blue vortex of energy of incredible magnitude appeared, and soon a hand no less enormous, with black nails, emerged from it. Zmei was completely paralyzed. Now he couldn't even breathe, and even his pupils had lost the ability to move. The enormous hand hovered over the ground. Stones bathed in a divine yellow light flew from beneath its fingers. At that very moment, the serpent opened its mouth wide and simply spat out Lin Huang. It was hard to believe that the boy was safe and sound, but that was exactly the case. The hero fell to the ground. The height was great enough to knock him unconscious from the impact with the rocks. The giant hand from the portal rose up again. It was perfectly clear that its goal was to destroy the super monster. And so it was. The serpent screamed that it couldn't all end like this. It had practically achieved its goal. The hand slammed the monster into the ground with such force that the scream was silenced once and for all. The scale of the opponents was incomparable. A fountain of blood gushed from the monster's mouth. Rocks flew in all directions from the impact. These were its death throes. Lin Huang miraculously came to his senses and immediately began to run. The hero realized that the monster might very well bury him under a hail of rocks. After running to a safe distance, the young man stopped and looked back. The Snow King towered above him. Shulo called out to Lin Huang. She was even more beautiful than last time. The time since her resurrection had not been wasted. The young man rushed toward the goddess. He was very happy to see her, and even happier that his friends hadn't left him in trouble, hadn't walked away. The Ice King replied that the lady had been worried, so they'd decided to return. The girl asked her pet not to say anything unnecessary. Lin Huang was simply overjoyed. He began thanking his rescuers. If not for them, everyone here would have simply perished. Remembering the other players, the boy fell silent. He didn't want anyone to see the goddess and the Snow King. Shulo told him not to worry about it. The guys were fast asleep, some so soundly that they were snoring. It was a funny sight. The goddess explained that she had used sleep magic to avoid unnecessary witnesses to her appearance. Suddenly, the snake's corpse began to disintegrate, streams and splashes of energy resembling blood streaming from it. The goddess raised her hand and gathered all that energy into a sphere, realizing that she owed Lin Huan her life and couldn't just walk away. The girl handed him something red. When the glow faded, it was an immortal snake. It could be placed in the Wheel of Life and raised as a pet. Once the boy became a super hunter, he would be able to turn this little snake into a real battle dragon. She had all the makings of one. All of this was wonderful, but Lin Huan was more concerned about the examiner's fate, and he asked her to save his friend. The goddess looked at him in surprise. The hero noted that events from 700 years ago shouldn't concern the girl anymore, but still his friend had been seriously injured because of him. Shulo noticed that the girl's life wheel was severely damaged and that the life of a super being was needed to save her. Was he willing to sacrifice the dragon? The young man replied that he was ready because human life was far more important. It was clear that he hadn't hesitated for a second. The goddess smiled, tossed him the pet, and said it had been a test. She had more suitable creatures to repair the wheel. The Snow King raised his enormous palms toward Yahello, and streams of energy began to envelop the beauty. The enormous monster seemed to be preparing her for the goddess's arrival, and she hurried to fulfill her promise. Shulo knelt down beside the hunter and began to work with her hands, healing her. A blue glow appeared. A firebird with something in its beak appeared out of nowhere. It began to approach, clearly taking part in what was happening. The goddess beckoned this magical creature with her hand, completely focused on the process. The bird seemed to dissolve above Yahello. A pleasant, warm glow enveloped the girl, and color began to return to her face. Now the girl was lying right in the middle of some kind of spell circle. The fiery bird's wings had become her own. It was all over, and Lin Huang asked if everything was okay. Shulo replied that the beauty would be fine once she woke up. The young man laughed happily and said that he would definitely find a way to repay her for her help someday. The goddess replied that she doubted he would have such a chance. She had already stayed too long in this world and should have left it long ago. The girl approached our hero and stood on tiptoe, whispering in his ear that she wanted to ask him one last thing. Shulo placed her hands on the player's chest. He began to feel nervous. He had never been so close to a divine being before. Finally, the beauty looked the young man straight in the eyes and asked if he believed in love. She was the most beautiful thing Lin Huang had ever seen. He was literally speechless, and the goddess repeated her question. She asked again if he believed in love, and only then was our hero able to control his emotions and return to his usual self. The young man looked at his savior and asked just how personal this simple question was. He understood perfectly well that Shulo still couldn't get past her past and what had happened several centuries ago. Lin Huang took a deep breath and uttered just one word. That word was love, and it was spoken with particular tenderness. The young man said that regardless of whether one believes in love or not, it happens. The goddess's eyes widened even further. The hero added that true love is so precious that it cannot be earned, cannot be undone, and cannot be denied. Love cannot disappear just because someone betrayed you. Even if the one you love betrayed you, it does not negate its existence. Lin Huang replied that one must embrace one's feelings, whether love or hate. They make you more beautiful and stronger. The young man replied that in his eyes the goddess shone like the sun, just as any other girl would shine in the rays of love. At that, Shulo's expression changed. With a suspicious tone, she asked what Mr. Lin meant. He didn't answer. The goddess stepped back slightly, adjusting her hair, and said that his words had given her pause for thought. Shulin replied that there was nothing to regret and that now she owed him another favor. The hero laughed and replied that he was the one who should be thanking her, not the other way around. The Snow King appeared and announced that the preparations were complete. This man had come here to help them, but had been attacked by monsters, and he was holding a player in his hand. The goddess announced that she had altered the memories of everyone present, so that this man would be regarded as a savior. Lin Huang realized this was done for safety's sake, so that people wouldn't conclude he, the heir to the gods, was the cause of all the disasters. The goddess began to leave. She repeated several times that she was leaving and that Mr. Lin should take care of himself. The girl rose into the air and was now at the height of her enormous pet's hands, which now looked quite good-natured. Our hero looked at Shulo one last time and said goodbye to her. To be honest, he was on the verge of tears. The beauty turned around and called his name once more, then said goodbye herself, this time forever. A blue whirlwind of energy swirled around the Snow King. A portal was opening that would take them away from this world. Lin Huang just stood there watching. The other players were about to wake up very soon, but the hero wanted to delay that moment. He whispered once more that they most likely wouldn't have a chance to meet again, and then fell silent once more. As soon as the goddess and the Ice King vanished, Yahello opened her eyes and gasped for air. The other players woke up too. Yiding was the first to ask the girl if she was okay. The guy was glad that the super hunter had arrived in time and destroyed the monster. Fortunately, no one was hurt. The beauty replied that she felt as if she had died and been resurrected. All the players were happy about the battle's happy ending, but Lin Huang stepped aside and turned away. Yahello looked at him and her colleagues and couldn't figure out what strange feeling was keeping her from calming down. The girl felt as if she had forgotten something very important and couldn't remember it no matter how hard she tried. She continued to watch our hero. Everyone returned safely from the snowy mountains, and Lin Huang also hurried home. He was very worried about his sister. He stopped at the door to her room, filled with joyful anticipation of seeing her. It was so nice to be back. The young man gently pushed the door open. The girl was asleep. He decided not to disturb her tonight. She would wake up early for school anyway. Completely calm and happy, the young man collapsed onto the bed. He hadn't felt such bliss in a long time. Shohei appeared immediately, saying he hadn't expected to see the hero alive. The hero replied that he wouldn't be himself if it had turned out any other way. Smiling, Lin Huang reminded him that he had completed his hunter registration by the deadline. Where was the promised reward? The assistant snorted and said he'd hoped the hero would switch to serving someone else. But since that wasn't the case, here was the card. It turned out to be an excellent card that restored the owner's body and Wheel of Fortune, healing any damage, though only once, and could very well save a life. And although Xiaohei claimed that it might come in handy at a critical moment, the young man replied that he had other plans for the card. The assistant tried to explain that with this card, one could recover from any damage. Wasn't it a shame to waste it on something else? The young man replied that Xiaolo had already improved his Wheel of Fortune and physical condition, so there was no need to worry about that. The buy card had appeared in his hands. Lin Huang decided to increase the vampire's resistance to sepsis so that he would be much more effective in future battles. As a summoner, you need to invest not so much in yourself as in your monsters. Xiaohei confirmed that there was some sense to this. Then our hero used the buy card he'd received as a reward without a moment's hesitation. He really wanted to level up the monster. Shards of energy began to fall on the vampire. It was clear that he was pleasantly surprised and perhaps even grateful. Immediately, his wings glowed with renewed strength, and his physique seemed to become slightly more robust. It appeared the plan had worked. The assistant was very curious to see how the effect would play out. He had never encountered such a technique before. He was about to remind him that the vampire needed to be released before falling asleep. But Lin Huang didn't hear him. He was snoring. In the morning, Lin Xin discovered that her brother had returned and screamed with joy so loudly that she scared the neighbor's cat. Breakfast was ready, but the girl paid no attention to the food. She hugged Lin Huang and told him how worried she had been. Suddenly, a suspiciously familiar voice announced that he hadn't expected them to be related. Yijing had appeared out of nowhere. He smiled sweetly. It turned out our hero was on a video call, which terrified the sister, and she slipped out of the frame. The girl ran off to her room, screaming that she should have been warned that the famous heartthrob from the top 11 hunters could see her. Yijing smiled and suggested they continue the conversation, asking if the hero was sure he wanted to take the six-armed sorceress Trickiness as his life force monster. Lin Huang replied that he had studied the data on many monsters, and only this one perfectly suited his needs. Her stats and skills were simply ideal. The hunter confirmed that her abilities would help with both swordplay and other weapons, but Trickiness was dangerous and not recommended as a life force monster. Our hero thought long and hard, but the monster was simply perfect for him to improve his stats. Yicheng suggested watching a few videos showing the six-armed sorceress's attacks before making a decision. Just then, Lin Huan's sister called out to her, saying she was ready and heading to class. The girl was no longer in her pajamas. Not only that, she was dressed as if for a fashion show, wearing her best clothes, stockings, and a handbag completed the look, which somewhat puzzled the guy. The beauty turned to Yi Sheng and said she was glad to meet him and really hoped they would meet in person soon. The brother was literally floored and gasped. Out of anger, the beauty smacked her brother on the head with her handbag and strode toward the door. Lin Huang complained that girls these days weren't nearly as modest. Just then, the hunter cleared his throat and said that Yi Yeyu had asked him to pass on her regards to the young man since they'd started talking about girls. Lin Huang wondered why the examiner hadn't called herself, while Yijing said he was busy, told him to watch the video and that they'd talk later. The call ended, and our hero pondered for a while longer what Yi Yu could be so busy with that she hadn't contacted him personally. He'd even lost his appetite. Since that was the case, there was nothing left to do but watch the six-armed sorceress in action, so the guy hit play. What he saw was so horrific that it was impossible to believe the association would recommend such videos. It wasn't just a battle on the screen. It showed horrific injuries and even the deaths of many players. Trickens held a ball in each hand and wielded them with the efficiency of a meat grinder. The hunters were practically powerless. Lin Huang stared spellbound at the monster, striking at completely unpredictable spots at incredible speed. The six-armed sorceress took down an entire squad of 6 hunters in less than a minute. The monster's face was hidden by hair, and it was impossible to tell what Trickness looked like, but she was clearly no fairy. Then the monster turned, revealing a sinister, satisfied smile. It was a true spawn of hell. Lin Huang tensed up. Now he was no longer sure of his choice. Defeating such an opponent was a very difficult task. After some time, the young man found himself in a town called Tiranora, which definitely deserved our attention. The guy walked down the street, still undecided on which path to take. Heading into the Forgotten Forest to kill Trickness would be good for leveling up, but very dangerous. Ahead of him appeared a magical tower for a spaceship, a structure of incredible beauty. He needed to go to the Forgotten Forest to obtain a special crystal to activate a skill. This could be done on the ship, and Tiranora was just the right place. Suddenly, a gust of wind hit the young man in the face. Taken by surprise, the hero shielded his face with his hand and winced. A huge ship appeared completely out of nowhere and immediately hovered over the tower. The sight was simply magnificent. Soon the ship began to descend to dock and open the entrance for passengers to board. A stream of people began moving up the stairs. Against the backdrop of the ship, they looked like specks of dust on an old dresser. Lin Huang was also boarding. An incredible journey lay ahead of him, one that would help him become not only strong, but also successful. Once on board, the young man found the right deck and walked down the corridor in search of his cabin. Inside, with a blissful look on his face, he immediately collapsed onto the bed. It seemed everything had gone smoothly, which was a relief. The spaceship had 11 decks with designated areas for rest and dining. The journey would make him feel like a wealthy man. The cream of society had gathered on the top floor. Our hero thought that someday he'd find himself there too. The news was reporting on the events at Snow Mountain. The super player who had defeated the monster and his team had become true stars. Now literally everyone was talking about them. But the funniest thing was that it was Zhu Li. Lin Huang was happy for his friends, but the next news item surprised him. It was reported that Bai Yang had refused to help his colleagues and had even mocked them. The eldest son of the famous family in its 16th generation had disappointed everyone and was now refusing to comment on the situation. Bai Yang himself wasn't too bothered by it, but a whole wave of condemnation and angry reproaches had erupted online. Our hero was a little surprised. It turns out that even a rich daddy's boy isn't immune to cyberbullying. Suddenly, an image of a crying Yin Yi Hang popped up, screaming that he hadn't expected his buddy to survive. This frightened Lin Huang. He tried to explain what had happened and that he hadn't intended to abandon the fat guy, but the latter had his own version of events. The blonde man cried that he had been looking for him everywhere. Instructor Yi had given him the hero's contact information, but he never got in touch. The young man smiled and said he'd been a bit busy with the incident in the Snow Mountains, so he'd simply forgotten. The fat guy sobbed that he'd missed him, that he'd thought about him every day, and had even erected a monument. Eventually, Lin Huan got fed up and just told Yin Yi Hang to get lost. The blonde man said sadly that Yi Yeyu had said the guy had chosen the six-armed goddess as his life force monster, and asked if that was true. Our hero replied that he was already aboard the magic crystal spaceship and planned to be in the Forgotten Forest as early as tomorrow. The fat man reminded him that this was the strongest monster of the Black Steel rank, one even the Copper Hunters couldn't handle. But Lin Huang replied that he'd seen the videos but decided to give it a try. The blonde guy got even more upset. It seemed to him that his friend was acting too rudely and arrogantly, even though he had put himself in danger. Yin Yi Hang noted that it was the examiner who had told him to warn the hero about the danger, and he was surprised again as to why the girl hadn't done it herself. It turned out that at first the heroine had asked her brother, but he hadn't been able to talk Lin Huang out of it, and she decided she wouldn't be able to do it herself either, so she sent the fat guy. Suddenly, there was a deafeningly loud noise and the young man cried out in surprise. He ended the call, promising to call back later, and jumped up from his seat to find out what had happened. The other passengers also rushed into the corridor screaming. The entire ship was shaking, and many feared they were under attack. An announcement came over the intercom stating that the ship had been attacked by monster birds. For everyone's safety, they were asked to return to their cabins. Almost everyone obeyed the order immediately, but Lin Huang was exactly the kind of person who would never do that. A huge flock was approaching the ship, and it was rocking violently in the air, so staying on deck would indeed be very dangerous. Looking at these countless monsters, our hero thought that the birds were constantly chasing him, no matter where he went. These were dangerous monsters with a wingspan of up to 2 meters and sharp claws capable of lifting even large livestock. The sparrows always attacked in groups. The passengers were terrified. The wind sparrows fed on human brains. Their only hope was that a ship like this wouldn't be taken so easily, or else they were all doomed. Lin Huang thought that these were the most unpleasant of all flying enemies, and just at that moment, one of the monsters attacked. The attack was unsuccessful because the ship's protective shields had already been activated. Everyone was asked to remain calm. Our hero sensed that something was wrong. The whole point of what was happening was to prevent panic, but things were looking bad. While the others began discussing the ship's strength, the young man watched the monsters closely, and what he saw did not inspire optimism. A golden raven, the king of sparrows, was hurtling straight at them at a terrifying speed. It was simply gigantic and clearly hungry. The beast plunged downward, intending to pierce the ship's shields. Given its size, that wasn't all that difficult. Its talons dug into the energy barrier, and the energy streams became jagged and uneven. It seemed the monster had good reason to be so confident. Everything around them shook. Debris from the shield struck the deck, and it was only by a miracle that it didn't hit anyone present. Lin Huang sat down, leaning against the wall. This wasn't the first time he'd encountered a gold-rank monster, but it was the first time he'd seen one so aggressive, and on top of that, winged. An old man dropped to his knees, trembling all over, explaining that the monster was quite capable of shattering the shields. Nothing would save them. The young man tried to calm the passenger down, but the man kept repeating that once the barrier was destroyed, they would all become sparrow food. Just at that moment, the Golden King attacked the spaceship's shields again, and everything around them flashed pink once more. It all stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Lin Huang tried to make out exactly what had happened. A figure of a winged man, illuminated by a fiery ball, appeared in the sky. Not only could he fly, but he was also quite effective at killing birds. Our hero was surprised that the ship had its own hunter, but it turned out that the player's level was lower. He was simply using gold-rank equipment. The old man laughed happily, saying that they were now saved. Li Yangxin would handle the monsters without any trouble. The passenger explained that he was number 5 on the list of gold-rank hunters, a celebrity, so to speak. The young man was indeed skilled. Without hesitation, he attacked the golden eagle, hardly doubting his success. A single strike was enough to kill this powerful monster. The eagle immediately began to fall. A few more swings and the smaller birds followed their leader. The hunter didn't stop. The sparrows fell one after another. The scene was somewhat reminiscent of a harvest or even a reaping. A minute later, the surviving beast flew away from the spaceship. Li Yangxin watched them depart with satisfaction. He had dealt with the threat. The passengers were thrilled. Everyone shouted words of gratitude. Lin Huang was impressed that a single sword had neutralized an entire flock. The young man thought that even this single attack would be enough for him to gain a grasp of the new sword technique. The main thing was to try his best. He rushed back to his cabin to repeat the movements and practice. The old man didn't even have time to thank him for his help. The hero explained to his assistant that he wanted to combine the player's skill with the sword technique he already possessed, enhancing it. Zhao He suggested watching a recording of the battle. Then Lin Huang began to repeat the movements he had memorized. It was a shame he didn't have that soothing tea from the hotel here, but you never know until you try. The young man closed his eyes and replayed the finest details of Li Yangxin's battle in his mind. He had to concentrate as much as possible. Lin Huang struck the first blow, saying that if that wasn't enough, he was ready to repeat the movement 10 more times. As expected, he didn't succeed, so he began refining his strikes further, realizing that if 10 weren't enough, he would repeat the move 100 times. If even 100 repetitions didn't yield the desired result, the player would train for as long as it took to succeed. The hunter paused briefly to catch his breath. He had long since broken out in a sweat. But that was precisely his method of survival. Lin Huang's eyes burned with passion, and he was deeply inspired. 5 hours later, an assistant appeared and suggested giving up on this endeavor. The gentleman had been swinging his sword for far too long. Then our hero decided that simply swinging the sword was pointless. He needed to try the battle simulator. He closed his eyes and visualized the 6-armed sorceress. Her attacks are usually quite haphazard, but every strike poses a deadly threat. His wild sword technique is quite good, but in this case, it won't be very effective. He needed to distract trickiness with a few strikes and then come up with something better. For example, increase his own speed enough to wear down his opponent so much that she loses her reaction speed. And then the right moment would come to use the summoning card and thus defeat the enemy. Bai will inflict several serious wounds. The main thing is that he doesn't land the final blow. The master must do it himself. It is precisely this final blow that must succeed in the new technique. The young man decided to focus as much as possible and execute it. To release his pent-up emotions, the young man let out a victorious battle cry. It was quite impressive. Then came the strike that nearly took Xiaohei's life, if, of course, it's even possible to take the life of a magical assistant. The little monster managed to fly off to the side just in time, and the sword fell to the floor, leaving behind quite significant traces of the player's power. Lin Huang beamed. He had succeeded, and the system had issued the first fragment of a new sword technique. The boy immediately asked Xiaohe if he would receive the card after collecting all the fragments. An affirmative answer followed, and the decision was made to continue training. Soon, the ship arrived at its final destination and docked at an equally magnificent tower. Lin Huang had to shell out a hefty sum for the damage to the cabin, but Xiaohe reassured him that the card he received was worth it. He decided not to go into the Forgotten Forest alone. There was a small town along the way where he could find some partners for backup. Moreover, the players had to be high level. At least one silver-rank veteran was required. The hero went to the agency with a request, saying he was looking for a team to spend a week in the Forgotten Forest. The girl replied that he was very lucky. A team with a gold-rank hunter was heading there today. If that didn't work out, he'd have to wait 11 days. She added that for a certain fee, she could arrange other escorts, but the guy had already spent too much on the spaceship. The hero signed the contract. For 12,000, they would escort him to the forest, and from there he would have to improvise. The administrator informed him that the team captain would contact him as soon as he approved the document. After leaving the agency called Adventurer's Paradise, Lin Huang spent some time wondering if he had made the right decision. Xiaohui insisted that he should look for someone else. The Forgotten Forest was dangerous and he could die there. But the young man decided to take the risk anyway. His ring vibrated. The message from the captain arrived unexpectedly quickly, as if he were in the next room. The hero was delighted. They had to be ready to set out from the southern gate at 9 o'clock. This gold-rank captain seemed truly powerful. Lin Huang headed toward the southern exit of the city, anticipating that he would soon defeat the monster with his life energy. He arrived on time, but there wasn't a soul around. It looked a little suspicious. But the young man decided to wait a bit. Just then, someone called out to him, asking if he was the player who needed to be escorted to the Forgotten Forest. The young man turned around. Standing before him was a girl who introduced herself as the team captain, Lin Yexin. If he wanted to survive, he had to obey her orders. Two burly men nodded in agreement. Surprised that the captain was a girl, Lin Huang confirmed that he needed to be escorted. The beauty asked if he had read the contract carefully. In the forest, the team would split up. Lin Yexing began to explain their mission in the forest, but then one of the players placed a hand on her shoulder and asked her to wait. The hunter smiled and explained that their mission was very important, but the agency had thrown in some extra work. At first, everything seemed fine, but now they were forced to decline. It was Li Yangxin, and his appearance came as a complete surprise to our hero. The player apologized for not being able to take on an additional team member and promised that the guy would get a full refund. Lin Huang thought he had mastered this hunter's sword technique, but the hunter turned out to be so irresponsible and didn't want to take him into the squad. Lin Yixing added that they would pay the young man enough to hire another team that would not only escort him to the forest, but also help him achieve his goal there. The young man smiled and was about to agree, but then Xiaohe appeared and cut him off before he could finish. The assistant held up a glowing rectangle and congratulated the player on receiving a special mission card. The task was to follow Lin Yixin into the forest, ascend to the Black Steel level, and then follow this hunter to the City of Forgotten Fears. He had 15 days to complete the task. If he finished on time, he would receive a skill card as a reward. But if he failed, he would lose one of his summoned monsters as punishment. Lin Yixin realized he could make even more money. While Lin Huang was thinking about what to do, he waited with a smile. Finally, he looked at the hunter and exclaimed that he hadn't agreed yet. It was quite aggressive and unexpected. Besides, the reaction seemed too intense and puzzled the gold-rank player a bit. It looked like new circumstances had arisen. Finally, Lin Yexing simply asked if the guy wanted to go on the mission with them without any guarantee of survival. He decided the threat would work. Lin Huang replied that he had already signed the contract, so he had no reason to change his plans and would go with the squad. The captain turned and walked down the road, saying that in that case he should follow them and not show off. Realizing that the young man was in no hurry to carry out the order, she asked him not to waste time. Finally, Lin Huang smiled and set off after them, saying he understood everything, while the other hunters looked displeased. One of them tried to calm Lin Yexin down, but he waved him off, saying it wasn't necessary. Everything was fine. He whispered that they only needed to escort the guy to the forest, so everything was fine. It seemed the player's mission was very important and secret. The team moved fairly quickly, but at night they decided to take a short break to rest, after which everyone mounted the birds. Now the hunters were soaring above the ground at such a speed that even the lizards scattered in fear. A 3-kilometer stretch could be covered in just 5 minutes this way. This method of travel filled Lin Huang with sheer delight. He sat behind the captain and didn't hesitate to share his impressions. It seemed the players were either incredibly lucky or came from wealthy families, since they could afford such a thing. And yet not everyone was pleased with what was happening. The monsters and the gold rank equipment did little to lift Lin Yexin's spirits. He was still extremely dissatisfied and flew on his winged pet with a look on his face as if the guy had insulted him. For some reason, the player had decided not to use his own wings. Everyone was curious as to why Miss Li Lang was looking after Lin Huang, so the commander decided to find out why he needed to go into the forest. The young man replied that he wanted to raise his level to the black steel rank, and for this purpose, had chosen a 6-armed sorceress as his life energy monster. This information shocked the girl. She asked why trickiness specifically, since with Lin Huang's combat skills, he was powerless against her. It was certain death. The hero then explained that if the plan didn't work, they could try with another monster. Li Yangxin replied that once their paths parted, the player's fate would be in his hands. Lin Huang laughed and thanked the captain for her support. Their conversation made Lin Yexin extremely jealous. Soon, the edge of the forgotten forest came into view right in front of the team, and they had to start slowing down. The players hadn't even had time to start when they heard a blood-curdling roar coming straight from the thicket. Judging by the intensity of the sound, only a gold-rank monster could produce such a roar, so they needed to prepare thoroughly for the encounter. After landing, the hunters began scouting the area. Judging by the sound, the source wasn't far away. The players reminded the captain that they had completed half the mission and it would be better to continue without the kid. The girl replied that as long as they were on the same path, there were too many monsters here that Lin Huang couldn't handle. The hunters tried to protest, but were told that it was safer not to split up for now. There was no need to argue. Orders were not to be questioned. Suddenly, Lin Yexin backed the commander, saying she was absolutely right. That would be the smarter move. Li Yangxin said they shouldn't waste time and should keep moving, while our hero thought that the team wasn't as simple as it might seem. They hadn't gone 100 meters before they spotted that very roaring monster. It resembled a dinosaur in some ways. It turned out to be a mutated gold-rank dragon, better known as the red gold armored dragon. This beast commands other gold-rank monsters and is worth a fortune. It's a shame they don't have a tamer on the team. Otherwise, they could have sold the dragon and struck it rich. Lin Yexin added that a weakling who hadn't reached the black steel level wouldn't stand a chance against this monster. It wouldn't even bother with such a trifle. The players reported that the monster was stronger than 100 gold-rank hunters. Only Miss Ling and their young master could stand a chance against it. While the young man thought the guards were just another meal, Lin Yexin noted that since they couldn't tame the dragon, there was only one option left. The young man's eyes flashed, and he loudly proposed killing the monster immediately. It was clear the hunter was confident of victory. The monster instantly spotted the people, rose to its feet, and roared again, smashing rocks with its tail. The power of its roar was so immense that Lin Huang couldn't even move, let alone attack. Lin Yangxin wanted to step forward first, but the young gentleman declared that he would not let the girl fight and would handle everything himself. That would be the gentlemanly thing to do. Lin Yexin activated his sword and asked them to wait a moment. He would handle it quickly before they could even blink. Meanwhile, the lizard had already lunged forward. Its speed was extremely high, and its roar didn't stop for a single second. The hunter didn't hesitate, and also flew straight at the monster. His face was completely calm and even cheerful. The team couldn't move and could barely speak. A bite or a strike from the dominant dragon was deadly. Could Lin Yexin really handle it? The captain noticed Lin Huang's despair and asked him not to panic. He explained that he couldn't, since this was a gold-rank dominant monster. The girl shrugged and explained that the dragon wouldn't be a serious problem for Lin Yexin. The player was very skilled. The hunter waited until the monster got as close as possible so he could teleport and attack from behind. Lin Huang guessed that the player had used teleportation. He wondered what else he was capable of surprising them with. The young man's eyes flashed. It was clear he had gathered the maximum amount of energy for the strike. The sword shot straight for the dragon's neck. By all accounts, the monster had next to no chance of survival. And so it turned out, our hero was impressed. The hunter had once again proven that sometimes a single sword and a single strike are enough to kill an enemy of nearly golden rank. It all happened so quickly that it was impossible to make out the details of this brief battle. The dragon collapsed to the ground. Lin Yexin walked toward the team through the dust, while Lin Huang couldn't understand why this man was so strong. It seemed as though he was even too strong, since this wasn't a super hunter or a high-ranking official. The player, brimming with self-confidence, walked past the young man. It seemed the tension between them had only grown since the incident. Lin Yexin realized that the young man's legs were still numb and advised him to take a couple of steps forward. His attitude infuriated Lin Huang to no end. Looking at the defeated monster, the guy thought sadly that he still couldn't take down a dragon. And that was a real shame. And yet he didn't give up hope of someday obtaining the dragon's card and adding the monster to his collection of summoned creatures. Suddenly, the system announced that drops of blood from the mutated dragon had landed on the hero, and now he could form a card fragment. He was offered the chance to merge the monster's souls to obtain the dragon, and the young man found the idea tempting. He waved his hand at the others to move ahead. He'd catch up with them soon. He needed to use the restroom. The captain was a little worried. It was dangerous here. But Lin Yexin reassured the girl with a smile that he would go first. The players laughed, saying the kid wanted to take something from the dragon to sell, since he was poor. Both knew that the monster's blood was deadly. Meanwhile, Lin Huang stepped closer and asked Xiaohe what needed to be done to trigger the absorption. The assistant explained that he needed to touch the corpse and allow its soul to merge with the snake given by the goddess. The hero raised his hand but didn't place it on the monster's skin. A faint glow appeared immediately. Apparently, everything was correct. The young man felt the immortal magical soul of the dragon, or rather, the serpent they were about to become, grow stronger. Meanwhile, the defeated monster began to crumble into fragments, and a whirlwind of energy swirled above it. These particles swirled into a spiral and rushed toward the young man in several streams. Lin Huang screamed in pain. The fusion of the dragon's soul and the mystical creature bestowed upon him was taking place, and the sensation was far from pleasant. But the reward turned out to be beyond praise. A card depicting a young dragon materialized before Lin Huang. The young man couldn't believe his eyes. He rejoiced like a child. The card was blue, meaning it was a monster of the legendary rank. It was an immortal young dragon with stunning stats that could be easily leveled up. It was a powerful creature that, moreover, grew stronger thanks to dragon blood and had the potential to reach its full potential. The monster was very powerful and rare, and could well grow to become a king and then a god. This information stunned our hero. The boy recalled the goddess's words that this dragon would rise above all other creatures. It seemed there was truth to that. The assistant suggested creating the skill right away. Otherwise, he would go to sleep. Lin Huang shouted that he would do it immediately. Our hero really wanted to win enhanced regeneration for his pet, but the randomizer assigned absolute protection, or rather, invulnerability, to the card. Xiaohe muttered something about how if you're unlucky in everything, but it was clear the player was just overreacting. He was actually pleased. In close combat, such stats would be very useful, so there was no need to joke around here. Lin Huang set off to catch up with the squad. It was just a pity that he wouldn't be able to summon the little dragon until he reached the Black Steel rank. It turned out the players had advanced quite far, and the young man had to shout to call them over. The commander asked them not to stray from the group anymore. This was a dangerous place, and Lin Yexin continued to be tormented by jealousy. At that point, the hero decided to ask Miss Lin whether the black and red dragon was a carrier of the dragon lineage, of dragon blood. The girl explained that no, but after being killed, this type of monster could mutate and eventually even turn into a super monster. This meant that if such a dragon appeared again, it could have enhanced characteristics and become a blood dragon. At this point, Lin Yexin pushed Lin Huang aside, saying that he knew a lot about this, and that even demigods barely managed to handle monsters of this type. The player added that the association didn't share this information widely, and our hero realized that the monster was very rare, practically unique. Finally, they reached the clearing where the young man had to part ways with the rest of the group. The six-armed sorceress was about 3 kilometers from this spot. The young man was already ready to say goodbye and leave when the team captain tugged at his shirt. The girl asked him not to rush things. There could be up to 3 life energy monsters, so he should assess his strength wisely. Lin Huang laughed, saying he knew. They could choose someone else if this one proved too much for him, after which he wished the players luck on their mission, even though he didn't know what it was. Lin Yangxin smiled and thanked him. It seemed she liked how the young man was riling up his teammates. Our hero was pleased. It was the girl's first smile. She seemed rather cold, but she was clearly a kind person. Well then, the time had come to fulfill the reason the player had ventured into this forgotten forest. There was no putting it off any longer. The guy summoned Bai and told him that now they were going to hunt the 6-armed sorceress. They needed to hurry. A grove of withered trees appeared ahead. Lightning constantly flashed above them. It seemed this was the monster's lair. Trickiness was an immortal being, so after victory, her energy would pass into the hunter's wheel of life. But the monster was particularly powerful at night. Observing her behavior, our hero decided not to take any risks and to postpone the battle until morning. Besides, there were now two six-armed creatures nearby. He could have defeated one of them alone, but against two, he stood no chance. The hero asked the vampire to scout the area to see if there were any other monsters nearby. Something happened, and both guys took off without waiting to be attacked, caught off guard. Lin Huang decided to check his stats. To level up, he still needed to kill two monsters, a difficult task. Suddenly, Bai grew alert and placed a hand on the young man's shoulder, urging him not to make too much noise. It seemed there was something interesting nearby. What he saw really made the guy tense up. They'd stumbled upon a rare type of this monster, a true rarity. It was a mutated six-armed sorceress. Her dress was purple, and she was busy casting a spell. The hero knew that killing two at once was practically impossible, but if he killed this one, he could earn more points. It was a great opportunity. He immediately ordered the vampire to begin, making sure not to deviate from the original plan. These monsters had no voices, so they couldn't call for help. One had to be distracted while Lin Huang dealt with the second. The six-armed monster noticed she was under attack and turned to face the danger. The vampire was rushing straight at her. The monster's weak spot was its mask, but Bai couldn't get close enough to strike. His opponent was faster. Then the vampire decided to use ranged attacks, since he could send flames forward from his wings. Flaming projectiles rained down on Trickiness, but she managed to block most of them with her hands. Thinking that he could now attack unnoticed, Lin Huang rushed forward. His chances of success were quite high. His target was the six-armed sorceress in a purple dress, who was still completely unaware of anything. Unfortunately, the monster turned around at literally the last moment. The player cursed. His plan had failed. His opponent reacted very quickly, and she was much stronger than her friend in red. Realizing that Trickiness had combined physical and magical attacks, the young man was quite frightened. He looked flustered. A whirlwind of energy crashed into the grove. Everything around them glowed with the blue energy of the mutated monster. The attack was so powerful that Lin Huan barely managed to stay on his feet, though he didn't sustain any serious injuries. Bai looked at the gentleman, waiting for orders. The man shouted for him to deal with his prey and not pay him any attention. The young man drew both pistols and started firing, but the six-armed sorceress was faster than the bullets. In response, the monster attacked with its spikes. The guy barely managed to jump aside before it pinned him to the ground. If this kept up, he really wouldn't make it out of this mess alive. Well, it was time to adjust the plan. A new volley of spikes flew at the young man. It seemed as though one of them had pierced right through his chest. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. Our hero used his stealthy gait and moved far away just in time. Now he was behind Trickiness. Meanwhile, Bai was holding his own quite well. His wings glowed yellow and served him well in the hunt. The six-armed woman in red was securely bound by streams of vampire energy. She could no longer move. Lin Huang appeared right in front of her, preparing to deliver the final blow with his sword. He was certain he had won this round. It turned out he wasn't the only one capable of moving at superhuman speed. A monster in purple appeared right behind the hero. Neither the young man nor Bai had expected this at all, and now they were frantically trying to figure out what to do. The system announced that when the master's life was in 100% danger, the rescue plan would activate, allowing him to use any monster card. This time the transformation function was available. Trickiness's claws were already inflicting wounds, and the game asked if Lin Huang wanted to take advantage of the offer. The young man shouted his agreement so loudly, it was as if the speed of the transformation's activation depended on the volume of his voice. He was instantly thrown backward, and now the six-armed sorceress no longer posed a deadly threat. Lin Huang crouched down. Only his dark silhouette and glowing red eyes were visible, a sight not for the faint of heart. Two glowing yellow wings sprouted from the boy's hunched back, exactly like those of the monster he had summoned. He opened his eyes, his appearance had transformed, and power filled his body, the true power of a vampire. The sensations were unlike anything he had ever experienced. The young man felt simply overflowing with energy and power. Well, there was no need to delay, he attacked instantly. A yellow and blue wave of magic crossed paths but did not mix. It was clear that Trickiness hadn't expected anyone to try to outsmart her, but the monster was very fast and adapted easily. But not to something that could kill her. The first blood could very well have marked the beginning of the end of the battle. Suddenly, the monster's lower jaw dropped a bit too low, and a glowing projectile appeared from its mouth. Soon, a surge of energy engulfed Lin Huang entirely. It became very difficult for the player to move, and he literally froze in midair. His trusty sword helped him withstand the onslaught, but he urgently needed to figure out what else he could do. Suddenly, an idea struck the young man, and he immediately wanted to put it to the test. He didn't have time to do so, because the six-armed sorceress had transformed as well. Her mutation hadn't stopped yet. Now the energy streams of her attack had become even denser and more powerful, sweeping away absolutely everything in their path. Our hero noticed that the passive skill he'd received from the dragon had activated. It was called Absolute Protection, and at least allowed him to avoid dying on the spot. If all his existing skills remained available after the transformation, he could certainly make use of a couple more of them. First and foremost, the traceless snow walk to instantly move beyond Trickiness's range. As soon as the boy jumped back, the monster stopped its attack. It even looked a little confused that it hadn't killed its prey. Lin Huang realized that the next attack was imminent and activated his Sword of the Wild to absorb that wave of energy. It turned out that Trickiness had no intention of attacking, but something else. A heart-wrenching scream burst from her open mouth, surprising the young man. The possibility of calling the second six-armed sorceress for help was exactly what he hadn't expected at all from the monster he was fighting. Bai was also a little taken aback, but immediately realized that now he would have to fight on two fronts at once. No doubt about it. The vampire moved behind the monster in the red dress and tried again to bind it with the energy streams from his wings. This time, things didn't go as smoothly because Trickiness managed to swing her arm in response just in time. One of her sharpest claws caught the vampire's forearm, but despite this, Bai tried to stay calm. Not only that, but the summoned monster was seriously enraged. It had been a very long time since anyone had inflicted significant damage on him. The flames tightened their grip around the six-armed sorceress's neck, nearly choking her to death. Cracks began to appear in her mask. When the monster's life force finally left her, she began to fall to the ground like a doll. Lin Huang praised Bai for his excellent work. The young man was a little concerned about the vampire's wound and asked if there was anything he could do to help. Bai said nothing in response. Meanwhile, the purple-clad Trickiness turned and attempted to flee. At least, that was the impression he got. The guy shouted at Bai to hurry up and not let the monster get away. Bai nodded in agreement and rushed after her. The diagram showed that he was very close to reaching the black steel level. This six-armed creature would be the icing on the cake. The vampire was fast, but the flames on his wings were even faster, leaving the gloomy gentleman far behind. Contrary to expectations, they failed to bind the monster. She managed to deflect these streams of energy by spinning around her axis, but Lin Huang was already right there. He was flying straight at Trickiness, raising his sword for the decisive blow. In a split second, the powerful monster's life was finally over, at least in this physical form. Our hero landed on the ground with the clear realization that he had just cut the six-armed sorceress in half. Her mask became completely still. Energy was leaving her body through the gash, and her eyes lost their evil glint. Finally, Trickiness collapsed to the ground, and the young man stepped aside. He needed to return to his true form. A notification appeared stating that Lin Huang's body had strengthened its life wheel and absorbed a new type of energy. Global changes began, associated with reaching a new level and mastering the newly acquired life force. A glowing sphere slowly rose from the monster's chest. It swayed in the air for a moment, then moved toward our hero. He realized that this was the very life force itself. The system was analyzing the cards and all his stats. Soon a new card materialized and Lin Huang reached out to take it and examine it more closely. It was the Trickiness card, but whereas the energy indicators had previously been at 10%, they now reached 20%. Apparently the power of the violet mutation. There were no more doubts, and our hero activated this amazing card without hesitation. Trickiness's skills were practically at the gold rank, meaning he had made 80% progress, and the young man had significantly improved his stats using her skills. Now the monster of his life energy was a six-armed sorceress, and the corresponding abilities had appeared. But the best part was that he could now summon two monsters at once, so Bai would have much less work to do. Well, now it was time to comb through the Forgotten Forest. Besides, it wouldn't hurt to find the players who had accompanied the guy here and complete the quest. But first, he needed some solid advice. An assistant with foam on his head appeared. He was about to take a shower and go to bed, so he was grumbling discontentedly. It turned out that Lin Huang wanted Xiaohei to take a look at his first summon after leveling up. The young man chose an immortal dragon, which was now supposed to be a little stronger as well. Our hero gently stroked the black monster. He had expected it to remain red, but this wasn't bad either, so the hero decided to name it Hey Tang. The young man raised his finger. There was very little left before this creature's historical rank would rise to legendary. He ordered Xiao He to use the upgrade card, but his assistant wasn't thrilled with the idea and advised him to think it over. Lin Huang didn't understand what the problem was, since he had such a card. It turned out that rare monsters required not one, but two. But even if the necessary cards were collected, it was better not to use them right away. This information came as a surprise to the hero. It turned out that after reaching the legendary level, Lin Huang would have too little personal energy to control such monsters. He would first need to raise his rank. The player pulled out his pistol and declared that in that case, he would make the most of the opportunity to level up in the Forgotten Forest. He fired a shot and ordered Bai and Heitan to follow him deep into the thicket. There was plenty of work ahead of them. Their first prey was a white eagle with a purple eye, or rather, a whole flock of them. They didn't have to search long for monsters. Next, Lin Huan and his summoned creatures encountered feathered wolves, which were no trouble to deal with. Map fragments quickly piled up. After collecting a whole map, the boy was delighted. Such speed-boosting skills could very well come in handy in the future. This monster granted additional points to strength and also activated the blood hunt skill. It wasn't rare and belonged to the copper rank. The young man decided to acquire one of the monster's skills. The system randomly selected blood hunt, which gave him greater ability to track prey by scent. Well, he had to try it out to see how it worked. So the player immediately decided to continue clearing the forest. 7 days later, Lin Huang had noticeably improved his stats and those of the monsters he summoned. In the evening, he was roasting meat over a campfire, getting ready for bed. Shohei appeared, and the guy invited him to join the meal. But the assistant was more interested in what kind of activity he had been up to. The life cycle had shortened again. It turned out that by using life energy, just like a magic crystal, one could raise their level. The communication level had now peaked and plateaued at 70%, so he had to make sure it didn't drop again. When Heitang and Bai kill monsters, their energy also flows into the player's wheel, so there's a chance to rise to the 3rd steel rank. Lin Huang reminded him that he would soon need to track down Li Yangxin and the others, and then return. As long as his level was Black Steel 1, that wouldn't be enough. Xiao He praised the idea. Nevertheless, the assistant decided to show the player the current stats to wrap up the hunt. The young man was satisfied. He had become much faster and stronger. Nevertheless, Xiao He informed him that he had nothing to congratulate him on. The young man ignored these words. He turned his attention to the meat and asked for the statistics on the collected cards and fragments as well. There were plenty of those too. Suddenly, the assistant stopped reading the stats and announced in surprise that a new mission had also been received. It turned out that the previous mission had been revised. They needed to find Li Yangxin and escort him to a safe place, helping him return to the city. They were given 20 days to complete it. Lin Yehang was mentioned as the one who must leave the forest. In case of failure, 2 summoned creatures would be confiscated, and in case of success, a special map would be received. Our hero announced that he was refusing this mission. At his level, venturing deep into the forest was too dangerous. The assistant reminded him that refusal was not an option. He could admit defeat, but then the punishment would be activated. The young man didn't want to hear that. Then Xiao He narrowed his eyes and asked if the gentleman agreed to have a historical level card taken away. This angered the hero even more, but the assistant reminded him that the mission could not be cancelled, though he could count on his support in carrying it out. Xiao He pointed out the location where the squad captain's imperial ring had last been detected. From there on, he would have to search on his own. The young man made his way into the depths of the forest, reflecting on the fact that everyone has their own path, but monsters that simply cannot be defeated might stand in his way. Suddenly, he came upon a large rock with strange marks on it. He wondered if they had anything to do with the girl he was looking for. Well then, it was time to apply his blood hunting skill and use his prey tracking abilities. Even if the target in this case was somewhat different, the activation was successful, and now Lin Huang's eyes had become much sharper and more alert. He needed to find the trail. His sense of smell had sharpened just as much. Among thousands of scents, the hero found the one he needed and set off along the squad's route. He was practically crawling on all fours, but he still caught the scent of Li Yangxin's perfume. The vampire pretended not to find it amusing. After a while, the young man stopped in front of a majestic waterfall. The scent faded at this spot. likely because of the water. There was no cave or passage in sight, so the question of where the players had gone remained unanswered. A hunch came to him suddenly and was quite crazy, but it was still the only possible option. The new monster card he had absorbed came in handy again, and the young man activated it immediately. It was a shadow ghost he'd obtained not long ago. It could penetrate places a physical body would never dare to go. For example, underwater near the waterfall, Lin Huang ordered a search to see if there was a hidden cave or passageway. He explained to Bai that the only reason the scent had disappeared was because it had gone deeper. An hour and a half had passed, but the shadow spirit still hadn't resurfaced. This meant it had found some path and was following it forward. But the guy started to get nervous. The shadow couldn't have drowned or been attacked by another monster, and besides, it was immortal. So why hadn't it returned? A few minutes later, the ghost's head appeared above the water, and the player immediately stopped shouting. He was interested in the information he had obtained. The problem was that the shadow couldn't speak, so it simply listened to the man's questions. Finally, the player realized that the team was supposed to use diving gear, but he didn't have any. Although, come to think of it, he could find a way out of the situation by using special skills, and that's exactly what the young man decided to do. He used the transformation card again and calmly dove in. All that was needed now was to follow the shadow ghost. As expected, there was a cave underwater. For some reason, the summoned monster wasn't in a hurry to go inside. But Lin Huan himself became very curious to explore this place, and he rushed inside. Being in the body of an immortal creature turned out to be very convenient. There was no need to worry about breathing or anything like that, and the player swam forward like a fish. Soon he managed to reach the surface. It was a small chamber with an opening to the outside in the ceiling. Our hero decided to remain in the form of an immortal being for the time being. This would help him move forward under any circumstances. Lin Huang looked around carefully but saw no signs of Lin Yexin's team members. After a good 100 meters, the guy suddenly saw one of the group members, a blonde man. Judging by the looks of it, he was dead. A grimace of pain and horror was frozen on the player's face. Judging by the look, his death had been very quick, but not sudden. The guard was lying face down toward the water, which meant he had been killed while trying to make his way back from here. The wound on his back was large and looked like a burn and a puncture wound all at once. There was no way to tell how it had happened. Lin Huang hadn't received any reports that the mission had failed or been revised. At the very least, the team captain was still alive. The guy moved on, but another surprise awaited him there. One so shocking that his eyes involuntarily popped out of his head. It was a huge purple jellyfish with countless eyes and venomous tentacles. That was how the player from the team had been killed. But worst of all was that the monster's aura left no doubt. Standing before Lin Huang was a super monster. Our hero clutched his head. Another super monster was just too much. I wonder if its appearance was connected to the previous one in the snow mountains. Bloodstains appeared nearby. Since there were no other people or corpses, he had to keep searching as he moved forward. The young man guessed that the players had been wounded, but had managed to escape from the jellyfish. The cave turned out to be more dangerous than he'd expected, and moving forward blindly was risky, so Lin Huang activated Blood Hunt again. He hadn't even finished casting the skill when one of the tentacles lunged at him, opening its hideous maw. This was bad. His presence had been detected, and now, just to survive, he would have to put in a lot of effort. To hide, the young man squeezed into a small crevice in the rocks. He hoped the cover would help him weather the attack, but the tentacle rushed after him. Fortunately, it had no eyes, so the player managed to avoid taking damage. But to say he was scared would be an understatement. If it weren't for his shadow ghost form, the guy would have clearly been in trouble. But as it was, he managed to get his bearings in time, and the cover came in handy just in time. He decided to leave this place as soon as possible and return to his normal state later. It's easy to provoke a super monster. Death wouldn't be long in coming, and that wasn't part of our hero's plans. The young man ran forward, making sure to mark where the bloodstains were. That way it would be easier to find the team. Soon, two figures appeared ahead. The players were helping each other walk, but it wasn't clear which of them was injured, the captain or Lin Yexin. It turned out the young man was the one who had been injured. He had been poisoned by a jellyfish's tentacles and told his girlfriend that he wouldn't last much longer, even though she was trying to help. Lin Huang decided that if he showed up right then, it would be hard to explain everything, so he decided to wait a bit and watch. Lin Yangxin was extremely worried and kept asking how to save her partner. They didn't have an antidote. The player said that a blood exchange might help, but the captain didn't understand what exactly he meant. Lin Yexing explained that they needed a sample of her blood to replace the poison, so they could make it to the city. He didn't have to ask twice. The girl immediately pulled out a knife and began to follow his instructions. The stream immediately glowed with energy and headed toward the fallen hunter. The heroine asked him to wait a moment, saying it would get easier soon. Lin Huang thought there was some logic to it, but he doubted they could defeat the super monster's poison that easily. Then it dawned on the guy. Lin Yexing was planning to trade one life for another. He had tricked the captain. Lin Yangxin began to feel her strength waning and warned the player that she was going to stop the blood transfer. He agreed, but it was clear that this was just a diversion to lull her into a false sense of security. A knife appeared in Lin Yexin's hand. When our hero saw this, he wanted to intervene immediately, but he was too late. The scoundrel had already plunged the blade right under the beauty's ribs, and she gasped in pain and surprise. Li Yangxin whispered that this couldn't be happening. Her partner called her stupid. How could she not understand that he could only survive by killing her? There wasn't enough blood. The captain began to fall, and the scoundrel prepared to strike one more blow,